I'm the Dolphin of France. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26, The Terrible Debt. The next day, on his first day as assistant to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Joseph went early to the South Palace of Versailles, where the Chancellor's office was on the first floor. As he walked in a hurry, he couldn't help but think of how he rushed to clock in every morning when working on projects in his previous life. However, he also used this as an excuse to avoid the tedious breakfast part of the ceremony and simply ate some bread, grilled fish fillet and vegetable soup, which saved a lot of time. When Emin helped him push open the door of the Chancellor of Finance's office, he immediately saw Brian pounding the table with an angry expression and yelling angrily in a low voice, "These selfish wretches, they talk about equality and justice, but in fact they only have gold coins in their eyes. Don't they know that this will strangle the entire country's finances?" Joseph stepped forward to help the brass pen holder that had been knocked down on the table and asked, "Archbishop Brian, who are you angry with?" The secretary on the side quickly whispered, "Your Highness, yesterday afternoon the High Court formally refused to register the tax bill." Brian sighed and said bitterly, "Those greedy nobles are going to destroy France just for a little land tax. Don't they know that when that day comes, they will also go to hell?" As a relatively upright priest, this was already the most vicious curse he could utter. He turned to Joseph and said apologetically, "Your Highness, I'm sorry for letting you hear these rude words." Joseph waved his hand. "It's okay, Archbishop, I understand how you feel." Then, he picked up the thick pile of bills that had been returned by the High Court on the table and saw the signature not registered on it. "Archbishop Brian, what are you going to do next?" Brian closed his eyes, pinched his eyebrows lightly, and said dejectedly, "We can only make some compromises, then seek support from the church, and try our best to convince those selfish and greedy guys." Joseph shook his head secretly. The other identity of those high priests was nobles. It was simply a dream to expect them to follow the teachings and save the world. Seeing that he remained silent, Brian sighed again. "Actually, I also know that this may be of no use. May God bless France." Joseph frowned slightly. He had to intervene in the tax bill. This incident seemed to be just the nobles' unwillingness to pay more taxes, but in fact it was a test of the royal power by the nobles. Historically, Louis XVI used both hard and soft tactics to get the bill, but the nobles relied on the courts and public opinion to defeat him. Since then, the nobles have confirmed that Richelieu is weak and can be bullied, and they have become more unscrupulous in fighting for power from the royal family, and the country has become increasingly chaotic. So Joseph must cut off this trend. Use the shortest time to implement the bill, suppress the arrogance of the aristocracy, and let them know that the royal power will always be the father of the aristocracy. This thing seems difficult to do, but it is not difficult at all. What the nobles relied on was nothing more than the right to register in the High Court and to guide public opinion and incite the people to fight against the royal family. Regarding the former, French courts are notoriously corrupt. No one in the court system is clean. As long as they catch their dirty deeds, there are many levers that can be used. As for the latter, using the internet, public opinion bombardment of the 21st century, and the various tricks of the new media to pay for the so-called public opinion methods of these nobles is basically adults beating primary school students. Joseph thought for a moment and looked at Brian, as if comforting a helpless old man. "Archbishop, actually things are not necessarily as bad as you think. Maybe in 3 or 2 months, the bill will be passed." "I hope it is as His Highness said." Brian nodded and walked heavily to his office on the west side. "I will see if there are any concessions in the tax provisions." Joseph also returned to the office on the east side and asked his assistant to get internal financial information and look through it carefully. The more he learned about France's financial situation, the more frightened he became, and it became difficult for the previous finance ministers. He wondered how they managed to prevent the country's finances from collapsing. France has a total debt of 2 billion livres, most of which is national debt. 60% are held by French nationals and 40% are held by foreigners. The interest on these government bonds is between 8% and 12%, which means that 200 million livres will be paid every year in interest alone. The country's annual fiscal revenue is only 500 million. 40% of which has to be used to pay interest, and there is no need to even think about repaying the principal. Point historically, it was not until after the Great Edict that the National Convention confiscated all the property of the church, and with the addition of the war dividends won by the emperor through his campaigns in the north and south, this huge hole was barely closed. In addition to national debt, there is also a more terrifying debt, which is short-term bank debt. This is a short-term loan borrowed from a bank in the name of the country when the finances encounter liquidity problems. It is usually repaid after selling the national debt, but the interest rate is as high as 15% minus 25%. Although this kind of short-term debt is less than 200 million livres, the monthly interest paid to the bank exceeds 1.8 million, and it is said to be short-term debt. But based on France's current financial situation, it is basically necessary to borrow new debt as soon as the old debt is repaid, which is basically the same as long-term debt. When Joseph was worried about the debt problem, his assistant knocked on the door and saluted him. "Your Highness." The people from Laborde Bank said that due to temporary business changes, the loan negotiations need to be postponed. The specific date has not been determined yet. Joseph nodded without paying much attention. "Thank you, I understand." Only then did he remember that one of his main responsibilities as the assistant to the finance minister was to discuss short-term loan matters with banks. To put it bluntly, it was the operation of borrowing new debt to repay old debt. He picked up the list of important items that his assistant had already prepared, and sure enough he saw that it included loan negotiations with Laborde Bank at 2 p.m. This money was mainly used to repay a 6 million one-year treasury bond due in 1 month. According to the original plan, the money would be loaned to 2 banks, respectively, and repaid with government bond proceeds 2 months later. The previous interest rates were 18% and 19%. It's really profitable to open a bank in this era. He couldn't help but sigh. In the 21st century, this interest rate would be a proper loan shark. Chapter 27 Sharp Sword. Joseph smiled and said to himself, "If I have the chance, I'll have to open a bank." He read through the financial information, pushed the document basket aside, rubbed his sore shoulders, and then picked up the documents on the new tax bill and started reading them. The bill contains a lot of provisions, with more than 30 pages in total. The more Joseph read, the more he frowned. The people who compiled these bills were really smart. They included all the messy and irrelevant things. As a person with higher education in the 21st century, he felt dizzy. He expected ordinary people to understand this. The things above are simply a dream, and it seems that they were worried that the bill would be blocked by the nobles, so the compilers deliberately added some taxes that favored the nobles and were unfavorable to ordinary people. But they didn't expect that this tax item, which had almost no impact, would become the focus of the nobles to attack the tax bill. Ordinary people simply did not understand the details of the bill's provisions. They heard public opinion propaganda that the bill would harm their own interests, so they joined in the opposition. In fact, the core content of the bill is to cancel the land tax privileges of the nobility and let the nobility bear some of the national finances. In addition, it stipulates that grains can be freely transported and bought, and eliminates tariffs between various domestic regions to promote economic development. This bill fully reflects the weakness and compromise of Louis XVI's government. Sugar mixed with fesses. He wanted to please both the nobles and the common people, but in the end, neither side wanted to see him. Thinking of this, Joseph picked up his pen and checked off all the taxes that were unfavorable to ordinary people and small businesses. Pulling a group of people and beating a group of people is the way to do politics after deletion. This bill is no longer a bargaining chip for the aristocracy to use against the government, but a sword to attack them. Joseph checked it carefully again, and when he wanted to hand it over to his assistant for recopying, he realized that it was already dusk. Forget it. Let's talk about it tomorrow. He stretched and threw the text of the bill into the drawer. Don't do to others what you don't want others to do to you. There is no emergency and he will not do the unethical thing of forcing subordinates to work overtime. As soon as he walked out of the office, he saw Emin coming with a maid. Your Highness, Her Majesty the Queen is hosting a gambling game in Mars Hall and invites you to participate. Joseph wanted to laugh a little in his heart. Why did it feel so weird for a mother to drag her son to gamble? However, he also knew that this was a very normal entertainment item in the Palace of Versailles. Even the Sun King Louis XIV specifically requested the palace to engage in more such activities and the instructions to the Crown Prince to enhance the relationship between the monarch and his subjects. Joseph nodded. Okay, I'll go right away. He first went back to the palace to change into the light and luxurious suits he wore for entertainment, and then followed the Queen's maid to Mars Hall. Even far away, bursts of noise accompanied by cheerful piano music could be heard coming from the hall. The guard at the door bowed to Joseph and pushed open the two-person high door. Queen Mary, who was playing baccarat under the huge portrait of Louis XIV, saw her son at a glance and immediately waved with a smile on her face. My dear, you are finally here. Joseph hurriedly walked over and bowed, and the Queen was obviously in a good mood. I heard that you have been busy all day in Brianna. Come and have some fun and relax. Oh, you know, I just won 10 in a row. A handful. I hope you have the same good luck as me. When the nobles around heard that the Crown Prince was coming, they all stopped and saluted him, especially the young girls in silk costumes, all of whom had peach blossoms in their eyes, and smiled coquettishly. Joseph looked at the nobles surrounding Queen Mary, who were constantly flattering, and the Queen, who was flushed and laughing because of winning money, but suddenly remembered the emotion of the later writers' week. She was too young at that time. Know that all the gifts given by fate have already been marked with a secret price. Note 1. Just as Joseph was sighing secretly, Mono, whose face was white with powder, trotted over with a smile on his face, pulled him diligently, and gestured behind him. Your Highness, you came at just the right time. We are worried about missing someone. Come and play cards with us. A young nobleman at the card table was startled when he heard this and disappeared at a very fast speed. Realizing the missing person situation, Joseph couldn't refuse the hospitality, so he followed the interior minister and sat down at the card table under the oil painting of the god of war. Immediately, a servant brought wine and drinks. 2 tens. Count Paps played the card. The gamma play is similar to Run Fast, but the smallest card is A, and K represents the king, which is the highest. Joseph took a glass of juice, looked at the cards in his hand, shook his head and said, no. When he saw the gold coins and silver rivers piled on the table, he couldn't help but think of France's 2 billion debt. Then he looked at the cabinet ministers opposite, who were carelessly swaying gold coins and having fun. He shook his head and smiled bitterly in his heart. Maybe it's necessary to have a big fortune. He was thinking about the national debt, and coupled with his poor poker skills, he soon lost 3 games in a row and lost 12 gold coins not far away. More than 10 aristocratic girls were staring at his table intently. Seeing that the Crown Prince was a little distracted, they thought he was unhappy because he lost cards, and they immediately clenched their pink fists and gritted their silver teeth. Several girls jumped into action. Some of them walked around to face their fathers or uncles, shrouding them with murderous intent and resentful eyes respectively. Some came to their brother and seemed to ask him how the cards were, while secretly picking up a piece of flesh on his arm and rotating it 180 degrees. In fact, according to the tradition of the French court, you cannot deliberately lose when gambling. But the 3 people at the table with Joseph decided to abandon this practice without hesitation at this moment. Mono split the straights from 6 to 10 in the middle and got an 8. Count Papas looked at the 7 issued by the Crown Prince, squeezed the 10 and Q in his hand, and firmly shouted no. Joseph's luck suddenly improved. He could win, no matter how hard he played. There was even a game where the biggest card was only J, which was almost all single cards, and he still won. The winning streak greatly increased his interest, and he forgot the time for a while, until he felt a little tired. He looked up at the clock and found that it was already 11:30 p.m. He hurriedly stood up and said goodbye to his poker buddies, letting Emin pack up his winnings and dragging his tired body towards the palace point. After leaving the hall, Emin followed and whispered excitedly, "Your Highness, you have won a total of 156 crowns. 1 EQ is equal to 6 livres, which means that Joseph won nearly 1,000 livres in one night." "Not bad," Joseph said with a sense of accomplishment. "I didn't do any work in the middle of the night, and I earned so much." But then he remembered the terrifying debt of 2 billion and couldn't help but do some calculations in his mind. According to the way he won tonight, the 2 billion could be paid off in about 550 years. Joseph sighed. To repay such a large sum of money, it was not enough to just start some money-making projects on his own. He had to use himself as a fulcrum to leverage the Industrial Revolution in France. This was the way to solve the financial problem. Therefore, steam engines and textile technology need to be developed as soon as possible, as well as supporting financial, patent and other policies. Joseph was thinking about the Industrial Revolution. He didn't know where he was going when he suddenly heard a gurgling sound from his stomach. He couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. He had been winning money all night and didn't even bother to eat supper. When he looked up, he found that the kitchen was right in front of the corridor and the lights were still on inside. Apparently there was an imperial chef on duty. This place is quite far from the crown prince's palace. I don't know how long it will take to have food delivered to me when I get back. Just ask the chef to get some food and just make up for it here. Thinking of this, he walked towards the kitchen. Note 1. From the biographical novel The Beheaded Queen by Austrian writer Stefan Zweig, November 28, 1881 to February 22, 1942. Currently, 34 big readers have invested in this book. With 66 more big readers, this book will be recommended as an investment and gain exposure. Because every recommendation during the new book period is very final, the author is willing to ask you to invest in this book, and it will also bring you dividends. The earlier you invest, the higher your returns will be. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28 Meeting Sadako at Night. Seeing this, Emin hurriedly took 2 steps forward, opened the kitchen door, and lowered his head to wait for the crown prince to enter. Sea Guard Captain Kesso did not expect that His Highness would suddenly turn towards the kitchen. He made a mistake and turned around to wave to the 2 guards and followed quickly. Joseph stepped through the door and saw that the kitchen was very spacious, with 6 or 7 huge chopping boards put together in the middle, exuding the smell of fish and spices, and surrounded by various ingredients and cooking utensils. Only half of the lights in the room were on, but there was no cook on duty. He remembered that, even if there were no dances or celebrations in the palace, there should be at least 3 to 5 royal chefs on duty at night. But what was going on today? Joseph walked inside and walked around a brown locker that was more than 2 meters high and 4 meters wide. He vaguely heard a rustling sound coming from the corner, but there was a shelf full of pots and metal spoons blocking his view, making it difficult to see what was going on there. Joseph was a little curious. What were the chefs doing hiding in the corner? Want to play cards in the evening? He turned around the wooden frame in confusion and looked up to see a short man standing with his back to him under the light in the corner, wearing a wrinkled white robe and long messy black hair. Only then did Joseph notice that there was a large tilted wooden board in front of the man. The board was riddled with knife marks and there were a lot of blood stains around it, which looked extremely strange under the beating candlelight. The man in white robe seemed to be very focused. Only then did he hear the movement behind him and turned around suddenly. Joseph's pupils suddenly shrank and he saw that the man's front was covered in blood and he was holding a black and red sharp knife in his hand. His face was hidden behind his long and messy hair, and a pair of round eyes with green light could be vaguely seen. And the hair hanging down to the waist is still stuck with sticky bits and pieces, like the entrails of something. There was a buzz in Joseph's mind, and he felt adrenaline rushing through his body in an instant. There was only one thought in his mind: IX. Sadako. He immediately jumped back hard, and his back hit the wooden stand with the spoon hanging on it, making a messy noise. He ignored the pain, and was about to turn around, when he saw Emin coming over, holding a short sword in his left hand, and pulling the crown prince behind him with his right hand. Protect His Highness. Emin shouted. Kesod secretly thought that something was wrong, so he rushed over with a few quick steps, drew his sword, and stood side by side with the attendant guards. He shouted immediately, and at the same time, turned his head to Joseph and said, "Your Highness, please exit first." More than a dozen of the crown prince's personal guards rushed in. They suppressed their fear of the thing that was unknown as a ghost or a witch, and pulled the gun, as if they were dead, pointing their guns at Sadako in the corner. At this moment, Sadako finally moved. She threw the knife in her hand into the air, inserted her fingers into her long hair, squatted down with her head in her hands, and let out a harsh scream. Joseph was startled and poked his head out from behind Emin, suddenly feeling that this Sadako seemed a bit familiar. "Hey, stop barking." He tried to communicate with Sadako. "Who are you?" When Sadako heard his voice, she was obviously stunned for a moment. She raised her head and looked through the gap in her hair. Her voice was trembling. "Your Highness, the king." "Huh? You know me?" Sadako nodded desperately. "It's me, Your Highness. I'm Perna." Don't shoot." Kesod stepped forward carefully, brushed the woman's hair away, breathed a sigh of relief, put away his sword, turned around and said, "Your Highness, it is indeed Miss Perna." Joseph, whose head was covered with black lines, looked at Perna and the blood-stained wooden board behind her, and said doubtfully, What are you doing here?" Perna subconsciously looked at her hand, and found that the knife was missing. She explained with wondering eyes, "Well, I'm helping Mr. Wallace to cut up the meat." As she spoke, she frantically wiped the blood on her hands repeatedly on her brown apron, then grabbed a hair tie on the ground, tied her long hair back, and hurriedly curtsied and saluted. "Your Highness." The crown prince, Joseph, looked at the blood on her face, took out his handkerchief and signaled, "Wipe your face." Emin quickly took the handkerchief, stepped forward and handed it to Perna. The latter took it carefully, and as she carefully wiped it on her face, an ivory white face gradually emerged. On that delicate face, a pair of light green eyes are like two clear emerald beads. The eyelashes are dark and thick, especially the pair of pear dimples beside the delicate red lips, which are even sweeter. They are different from the terrifying one before. Sadako is completely different. Joseph was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "I have never seen you dressed like this. You are very beautiful." He looked at the wooden board behind Perna, on which a small beast was neatly fixed with nails. It was a rabbit, with neat abdominal incisions and well-divided internal organs. He couldn't help but asked curiously, "Are you practicing anatomy?" Perna was shocked and waved her hands repeatedly. "I'm not. I didn't." "Don't talk nonsense." Joseph stepped forward and looked at the rabbit, nodded and said, "What a professional technique. Have you practiced it for a long time?" He looked at Perna again. "By the way, why are you practicing dissection in the kitchen?" Perna felt nervous when she heard the determination in his tone. The crown prince actually knew anatomy, so she might not be able to rely on him now. She clasped the fingers of her left hand hard with her right hand, hesitated for a while, and finally seemed to have made some kind of determination, suddenly puffed up her chest, and said loudly, "Your Highness, yes, I'm practicing anatomy." She took a deep breath, as if she finally said what she had been holding back for a long time. "I think the current climate is very unfavorable to the development of medicine. For example, women cannot study medicine, which is a serious restriction on medicine, and is even more unfair to women. I admire my father very much. I have been accompanying him to treat patients since I was a child, which makes me yearn for the profession of a doctor who saves lives and heals the wounded. I know my father loves me very much. He even agreed to let me wear men's clothes and help diagnose and treat patients as his assistant. I'm very grateful to him, but even so, he still firmly prohibited me from going to the operating table or practicing anatomy, because it would make it impossible for me to get married. No one wants to marry a female doctor. This is the reality. However, I still hope that I can become a doctor who is responsible for saving patients. I have no access to corpses, so I can only practice dissection with animals to become familiar with the structure of living organisms. I made an agreement with Mr. Wallister. Every night late at night, I can come here to practice dissection and cut the meat for the chefs to use the next day. He will help me keep the secret. At this point, her eyes were full of tears, and she had obviously suffered a lot from this matter for many years. She sniffed, and her tone became calmer. Your Highness, go report me. I scared you just now. This is the punishment I deserve, because this book is being recommended for new books. It is very important for young authors. I urge readers to save it, vote for recommendations, monthly votes, and leave messages. The young author is grateful. Your support is the motivation for me to code. Reader group 1,036,217,580. Everyone is welcome to join the group and chat and discuss together. Chapter 29. Become a fangirl in seconds. Joseph looked at the pitiful girl in front of him, shook his head slightly, and felt greatly in his heart. He had seen the words of Monk Lewis, a monk of this era, in Boehm's book. I hate, pity and despise all female writers. They should hold embroidery needles in their hands, not pens. Only embroidery needles is a tool they can use freely. Note 1. Until the 18th century, women's status was still very low. Even in France, the birthplace of the Enlightenment, women were not allowed to engage in writing, medical, lawyer, etc., or even have a bank account. Society firmly bound them to the family middle point. As a person from the 21st century, Joseph naturally disagreed with this concept. However, more than a dozen people on the side looked at Perna with strange expressions, seeming to think that it was extremely unfair for a woman to say that she wanted to learn surgery. A decent thing. Even Kessout showed the helpless smile he had when he saw a naughty child causing trouble, because Perna reminded him of his rebellious sister who insisted on studying law. But his smile made Perna feel even sadder. She's had enough of men's playful and mocking smiles. For a moment just now, she fantasized that the crown prince in front of her, who was praised by Professor Lagrange and had extensive medical knowledge, might have enlightened ideas. At this time, the attitude of his captain of the guard, it easily shattered her fragile expectations. The crown prince must have had the same idea as them. Perna raised her head and tried not to shed tears, but she saw the crown prince walking towards her, his voice full of encouragement. Anatomy is the basis of medicine. I very much support your practice in this area. Come on. Perna was stunned, her clear green eyes full of disbelief. Your Highness. Joseph picked up the scalpel on the ground and smiled heartily. A person like you who is ideal and has the courage to practice will definitely become a great doctor in the future. But Perna didn't expect that the crown prince would actually support her, and she started to stutter. I'm a woman. Your Highness, do you think women can also be doctors? Of course. Joseph handed the knife back to her and nodded. Doctoring is just a profession, and women are fully qualified. If one day I get seriously ill, I mean just in case, it is very possible that someone can save my life. That's Dr. Perna. If given the chance, I would even push for legislation to allow women to work in medicine. Oh, Your Highness. For God's sake, tell me, do you really think so? Don't you laugh at me. Of course. Joseph nodded sincerely. Perna's heart suddenly beat violently. His Royal Highness, as noble as the Crown Prince, supported her ideals, so what did she have to worry about? Can your dream really come true? I've never heard anyone say that like you. She stared at the Crown Prince blankly, feeling like she was in a dream. Everything around her lost its color, and only the Crown Prince shone brightly, just like the angels in Raphael's paintings. So beautiful and holy. She suddenly covered her face and sobbed softly, using her tears to vent her past grievances and her current joy. Thank you, Your Highness. The Crown Prince. Look, why are you crying when you're fine? Joseph patted the girl's shoulder. Just as he was about to comfort her a few more words, his stomach made an untimely gurgling sound. Perna was stunned for a moment, couldn't help laughing, and asked in a low voice, Your Highness, did you come to the kitchen for a late night snack? Joseph looked around awkwardly and said, I'm a little hungry, but I don't know where the chef has gone, so it's all in vain. The chef Maybe has to carry the dishes for tomorrow. Joseph knew that 99 times the chef was sleeping in, but he didn't expose her. After all, he had slept in frequently when he worked late shifts before. Your Highness, if you don't want to wait, Perna said softly, blushing as if she had made a great effort. Maybe I can make you some food. She looked at the Crown Prince nervously, fearing that he would laugh at her. Okay. Joseph nodded happily. Thank you very much. Fortunately, the fire in the palace kitchen was never extinguished, and the ingredients had been prepared long ago. Perna took off the apron she wore when practicing dissection, washed her hands carefully, and began to work in front of the stove. In less than 20 minutes, a plate of red wine baked foie gras with a strong aroma was placed on the small table, where the chef drank tea, along with a plate of beetroot and tomato soup. Cassou tasted a little of everything very responsibly, and after confirming that there was no problem, he stepped aside again. Joseph was already so hungry that his chest pressed against his back. He smelled the scent and suddenly moved his index finger. He picked up the tableau and was about to do it when he saw Perna standing aside a little awkwardly and hurriedly waved to her. You come and eat too. The girl waved her hands repeatedly. Thank you, Your Highness. I won't eat it. Please try it quickly. Do you like it? Joseph looked at the foie gras on the plate, which was enough for 3 people. He pulled her to sit down involuntarily, took another plate, divided the dishes equally, and said with a smile, how can it be that you have been busy for a long time and let you watch me eat? Besides, I can't starve. France's first female doctor. Perna's face instantly turned red. She lowered her head and silently picked up the knife and fork. Joseph put a piece of golden fried foie gras and a piece of black truffle into his mouth. His mouth was immediately filled with the unique aroma of oil, but under the adjustment of the truffle, it did not appear greasy at all. The teeth penetrated the crispy skin, and the foie gras below was tender and melted into the mouth with almost no obstruction, making Joseph narrow his eyes in enjoyment. After swallowing a large piece of foie gras, he pointed his fingers and praised, that's great. If you don't become a doctor, you can certainly accomplish a lot as a chef. Really? Perna's eyes were full of joy. I learned it from Mr. Wallister in my spare time. Joseph cut off another piece of foie gras, held it up and gestured, to thank you for your food. I decided to give you a gift. No, I'm very happy, if you like it. How can I accept your food again? Joseph smiled and said, you're welcome. The costume you wore when practicing anatomy just now is long and cumbersome. Later I will ask the tailor to make a special doctor uniform for you. Oh, it may be promoted nationwide in the future, so just think of it as helping me. Try it on. Perna's face turned red to the tips of her ears. She lowered her head and whispered, thank you, Your Highness. Early the next morning, as usual, Perna waited for the Crown Prince to get up and carried the medicine box to do a routine checkup on him. But the difference from before is that she did not apply that kind of dark powder on her face today, and her lips kept their original color. Her face looked delicate and smooth, showing a healthy and beautiful beauty. She came to Joseph, put down her suitcase, bowed, took out the medical records and asked, Your Highness, do you feel your throat still hurts? Much better, just a little bit better. Cough. It happens occasionally, but it's rare anymore. It's their phlegm. A little bit. The girl carefully wrote them down one by one. Suddenly she raised her eyes and caught a glimpse of the handsome lines on Joseph's face. She felt her heart beat violently, and a thought flashed through her mind. The Crown Prince is so handsome. Why didn't I notice it before? Her face turned red instantly. Note 1. From the work Reading is a Portable Refuge by Morum, January 25, 1874 to December 16, 1965. Chapter 30 Pharmaceutical Factory goes into operation. Perna hurriedly completed her routine checkup, picked up her suitcase, and ran out of the house like a frightened deer without looking back. However, after exiting the door, she turned back and glanced at the Crown Prince at a very fast speed. Take a look. Joseph looked at her back and blinked in surprise. Is she having a bad stomach? South Palace of Versailles in the Chancellor's office. Brian took the obviously much thinner text of the tax bill from Joseph and said doubtfully, Your Highness, you seem to have deleted a lot of taxes. Joseph nodded. Yes, this is my attempt. Brian hurriedly opened the bill and looked at it item by item, but his brows became more and more frowned. When he was halfway through, he finally couldn't help but look at Joseph and said, "Your Highness, are all the clauses that you have deleted that are beneficial to the nobles?" "Yes, Archbishop." Brian put the bill back on the table, shook his head and said, "Why are you doing this?" Joseph asked rhetorically, "Do you think you can get the bill passed if you keep making concessions?" Brian shook his head. "That's it, so let's think differently. You can try submitting this bill to the High Court first." Brian sighed. "Your Highness, this will not have any effect except irritating the nobles." Joseph smiled and said, "Have you ever seen a bullfight?" "Bullfighting? Yes, Your Highness, I have seen it. The matador always has to use red cloth to make the bull angry. That's because the angry bull will lose its mind and make mistakes, giving the matador an opportunity to strike." Joseph said, "Let those nobles be angry. It's okay, not good, please. Believe me, even if it is still rejected this time, this bill will be passed sooner or later." Brian was doubtful and said, "Can you tell me what you are going to do?" "Don't reason with those people, attack them, divide and disintegrate them, and at the same time, control public opinion, so that they can only bow their heads." Brian was surprised to see the Crown Prince's confident yet cunning eyes. For some reason, he suddenly felt that he might not be fooling around for a long time. Brian nodded and then laughed. "Okay, then I will send this bill to the High Court, but please don't say that you made these changes, otherwise those greedy and selfish guys will definitely bear a grudge against you, and if the bill cannot be implemented before the end of the year, I should leave the position of finance minister. In the little time left, let's give it a try. Thanks for your trust." Joseph didn't expect to be able to convince Brian so quickly. He didn't waste any time and turned to his assistant. "Contact the largest circulation newspapers in Paris and reserve prominent space. After the High Court rejects the tax bill this time, it will immediately publish the first tax item in the bill in the newspaper and attach a detailed explanation of this tax, such as who will pay this tax and what impact it will have, etc. Wait. From now on, one tax item will be published every day until the entire bill is published and explained clearly." "Yes, Your Highness." In addition, a group of reporters should be organized to report in detail the bill from the time it is submitted for registration until the High Court rejects the registration. "Oh, don't report it all at once. Write a little bit at a time to keep it hot." "Yes." Besides, he was busy in the Chancellor's office until noon. Joseph finally finished the preliminary preparations for the implementation of the tax bill, and then had lunch with the Queen. Emin reported that Dr. Lamech had requested an audience. Joseph followed him back to his living room, and saw Lamech pacing back and forth anxiously. "Mr. Lamech, is there something going on at the pharmaceutical factory?" Lamech hurriedly saluted respectfully, and nodded first. "There is something." Then he looked very nervous and said, "Your Highness, I heard that the little girl offended you last night. She is still young, so she must not have meant it. Please forgive her." Joseph smiled and waved. "Miss Perna did nothing wrong. I broke into her laboratory accidentally. Oh, and she even treated me to a late night snack. Thank you for your magnanimity." Lamech hurriedly saluted again, shook his head and muttered, "I really shouldn't have agreed to let her study medicine. This child actually went to the palace kitchen to dissect animals in the middle of the night." Joseph praised, "Perna is very talented. In fact, you can let her go to the royal laboratory to practice anatomy. Oh, if you don't want others to know, I can ask the guards and servants to keep her secret." I really don't know what to say. Lamech's eyes were full of gratitude. "You are so open-minded. If the people in the medical association are half as open-minded as you are, Perna should have obtained a medical license and treated many patients." Joseph saw the glass bottle in his hand and asked, "By the way, you just said about the pharmaceutical workshop." "Oh, yes. Lamech hurriedly handed over the glass bottle. Excitement reappeared on his face. "That perfume workshop is perfect. The equipment is very complete, and there is even a water wheel. I only bought some high-precision thermometers and condensers, which were enough to purify salicin. Also, the workers are also very good and skilled, and many of them have been exposed to purification operations. You see, the craftsman made this last night, and Mr. Larcini, and I did not interfere in the whole process. Joseph looked at the beige powder, nodded with satisfaction, and asked again, how much do you estimate the output can be? Lamech thought for a while and said, if the raw materials are sufficient, it will be about 2,500 grams per day. Once the workers become proficient, it should be doubled. Well, it's basically enough for all patients in Paris, and it should be able to supply some to other provinces. Joseph said. If medicinal salicin is used to reduce inflammation and fever, about 5 grams should be taken orally every day. Paris has a population of more than 500,000, and 10,000 doses of the medicine per day are enough. Lamech nodded and said, Your Highness, Mr. Larceny and I made an estimate. Each pill contains 25 grams of salicin and costs about 3 to 4 denier. It will be sold at 5 denier in the early stage, and will be adjusted later depending on the income and expenditure. What do you think of the price? 1 livre is equal to 20 sous, and 1 sous is equal to 12 denim. In other words, 1 livre can buy 48 pills, which is definitely a very cheap price. You just decide the price. Joseph then remembered his angel water and said to Lamech, by the way, Mr. Lamech, I have some special needs here. Please purify 300 grams of high purity salicin every day and give it to me. Try to be as free of impurities as possible. A little more than 1 gram of salicin needs to be added to a 200 gram bottle of skincare products. 300 grams can produce more than 200 bottles a day, which should be enough for early market testing. Lamech said without hesitation. No problem, Your Highness. On the night that Joseph and Lamech were discussing the pharmaceutical factory, Patriot Party leader Dendels was welcoming guests from France in Amsterdam, the Netherlands, 400 kilometers away from Paris. Because this book is being recommended for new books, it is very important for young authors. I urge readers to save it, vote for recommendations, monthly votes, and leave messages. The young author is grateful. Your support is the motivation for me to code. Reader group 1,036,217,580. Everyone is welcome to join the group and chat and discuss together. Chapter 31 Huge Profits. Mr. Envoy Corbett. Dendels looked at several senior Patriot Party leaders beside him and sighed. After the vote of the Federal Provincial Assembly, we have officially decided to negotiate a truce and peace with the Orange Party. It will be held the day after tomorrow. The Orange Party, he called, was the royalist party that supported the former Dutch consul William V. It was named after William V's title as Prince of Orange. Kolb frowned, stood up, and said in a high tone, Mr. Speaker, what the French cabinet means is that there will be no compromise without peace talks. You and your army only need to defeat the enemy once and hold on for at least 5 days. The Great France will handle the rest for you, and you will eventually be able to thwart the Prince of Orange's counterattack. Dendels' face turned red. He clenched his fists and said, Mr. Envoy, we don't want to give in. But you know, Wilhelmina is a cousin and a traitor. She attracted the Prussian army and spread the news everywhere that we had kidnapped her. Kalb coughed lightly, looked away, and said casually, as far as my personal opinion is concerned, the Princess of Orange just did her best for what she was supposed to do, and it should not be considered treason. Dendels was stunned for a moment, and then he remembered that the envoy in front of him represented King Louis XVI of France. He suddenly felt a little ironic. It was another dictator who helped the Dutch people resist the dictator. Perhaps this is the sadness and helplessness of a small country. Dendels did not dwell on this episode and continued. More than 20,000 Prussian troops are now in Amsterdam, demanding that we release Wilhelmina. She is not in our hands at all, and our army only has 7,000 soldiers, and the equipment is far inferior to that of the Prussians. This was Wilhelmina's plan to help her husband recover, to make a high-profile appearance in The Hague, Netherlands, to attract the rebels to arrest her. Of course, the rebels were afraid of her status as a Prussian princess and quickly released her. However, she claimed that she was still being held by the Patriot Party and asked Prussia to send troops to rescue her. In fact, she quietly ran to the border city of Nijmegen and hid. Kalb nodded. I'm not asking you to defeat the Prussians, just make them aware that they will encounter fierce resistance, and I heard that 300 French boys voluntarily came to help you fight because they sympathized with your plight. They brought more than 2,000 muskets and seemed to have cannons. 2,000 guns and cannons? Dendel's situation became less depressed. This is exactly what we need. Where did you transport the cannons from? But, are 300 people too few? Kalb immediately denied it. Perhaps some people stole the cannon from the French warship. Please note that France assisted you with 600,000 livres, but never sent troops. Oh, don't think that 300 people are few. Most of them are artillery. You know, a good artilleryman may turn the tide of the entire war. Remember, this may be your only chance to retain power. Dendels looked at each other and said to Kalb, Mr. Special Envoy, we still need to discuss this, please. Only 1 hour later, the Patriot Party voted to terminate the peace talks, defend the city of Amsterdam, and fight the Prussian army. 2 days later, more than a dozen businessmen, craftsmen and even people dressed as beggars entered the eastern border city of Nijmegen in the Netherlands through different channels, and soon met 2 French spies in a small house on the outskirts of Nijmegen. These people gathered in a circle. Lieutenant Foytau, who was in charge of the operation, pointed to the east side of the Nijmegen map on the table and said, Wilhelmina should be hiding in Countess Lip's manor and rarely goes out. You guys should get familiar with the roads and environment in the city in the past few days. We'll do it when she goes to church this Sunday. Palace of Versailles. Joseph sat on the deck chair, taking in the sunshine of the winter afternoon, and let out a long yawn. The tax bill is still going through the process in the High Court. There is no news from the Netherlands for the time being. The police has just started, and there is nothing. Since he came to this world, he has finally been free for once. However, Dr. Lamech seemed to be afraid that he would be too bored, so he sent him the refined salicin he asked for last time. Joseph hurriedly told him that he would send someone to pick it up in the future, so there was no need to trouble him to travel all the way from Paris after sending Lamech away. Joseph picked up the large bottle of powder that was almost purified into white, opened the bottle cap and smelled it. There was no smell of alcohol at all. It was very pure. He opened a box in the study room, which contained glycerine, rose essential oil and other accessories that had been prepared, as well as some weighing equipment. He carefully weighed out 1,000 grams of glycerine, 60 grams of rose essential oil and 22 grams of salicin, and mixed them together in a large glass flask. At this time, the solution has completely turned pink purple, exuding the aroma of essential oil, and there is no trace of salicin at all. Then, Joseph mixed the first portion of angel water according to the ratio of 1 part mixed solution to 3 parts water. He frowned and looked at the large bottle of thin liquid. As a cosmetic, it looked a bit ordinary. He thought for a while, and felt that he should add some thickener. He immediately grabbed the candlestick on the table and pulled out a candle made of high-grade beeswax. The candle powder melted into the glycerine, and as Joseph continued to stir, the solution quickly became thick and opaque. This is a bit like skincare products. He nodded with satisfaction, scraped out a small piece of angel water with his fingers, and spread it evenly on the back of his hand. It felt smooth and moist, with a floral fragrance, and was very comfortable. After waiting for half an hour, there were no adverse reactions such as allergies or irritation. Joseph called his beautician, and applied some on his face. Then, the beautician and his assistant were caught. Under Joseph's command, they put the sticky pink purple gel into 7-ounce oblong glass bottles, and then put the glass bottles into the hot pot in a delicate wooden box with angel water printed on it. Even though their hands were very nimble, the two of them worked hard until 3 p.m. before they finally finished filling about 50 bottles. Joseph confirmed that the beautician's skin felt good, so he ordered them to send 40 bottles to a more famous luxury store in Paris for consignment, with each bottle selling for 15 livres. He himself took the remaining 10 bottles to Queen Mary. When it comes to cosmetics, who can be a more suitable spokesperson than her? And its free endorsement. In the corridor, Joseph did a simple calculation and found that a bottle of angel water cost just over 1 livre. Glycerine in this era was refined from olive oil, which was expensive and accounted for 90% of the cost. On the contrary, the main active ingredient salicin has the lowest cost. A bottle sells for 15 livres. After deducting transportation and sales expenses, you can earn at least 12 livres and 10 sous. He couldn't help but sigh. It's true that women make the most money. Boss Ma will not deceive me, because this book is being recommended for new books. It is very important for young authors. I urge readers to save it, vote for recommendations, monthly votes, and leave messages. The young author is grateful. Your support is the motivation for me to code. Reader group 1,036,217,580. Everyone is welcome to join the group and chat and discuss together. Chapter 32 Big Shopping. Queen Mary pulled out the cork on the glass bottle with great interest, carefully took out some pink purple paste, and spread it on the back of her hand. Well, it's quite lubricated. Not bad. She looked at her son with a smile. Dear Joseph, you always bring me surprises. Where did you buy this? Joseph started sales mode. I developed it myself, and I call it angel water. It softens the skin, and is particularly effective at removing acne. Upon hearing this, Queen Mary immediately waved to the maid standing at the door. Morgana, you can try this, only. Then did Joseph notice that several pimples appeared on the maid's forehead, which she didn't even cover with powder. Many of these palace maids are only 17 or 18 years old, which is the age when they are prone to acne. Seeing Morgana walking quickly, Queen Mary took out one of the 9 wooden boxes in front of her and handed it to her. The latter immediately curtsied in surprise. Thank you so much, Your Majesty. Joseph said to the Queen with a smile on his face. You just need to find an opportunity to mention it in front of those ladies and say that you are using this. Queen Mary stroked his hair lovingly, but pretended to be angry. You want to get paid for giving me a few bottles of skincare products. Joseph immediately stood up straight in cooperation and put on an aggrieved expression. In order to try I'll produce angel water, I don't know how much effort I spent and how many experiments I did. I just successfully trial produced it today. I thought of you first and sent it to you immediately. As a result, you didn't even do this little favor. No help. The Queen was amused by him, picked up a biscuit from the table, fed it to his mouth, and comforted. Okay, can I tell them about the head office for you? It turns out that Joseph didn't have to worry about promoting angel water at all. There was no need for the Queen to help him publicize it. The noble ladies in the Palace of Versailles were eager to use microscopes to observe the Queen all day long. Once they discovered something new, they would immediately follow suit. That afternoon, the Duchess of Broglie, who came to chat with the Queen and listen to music, saw the exquisite wooden box placed on the dressing table. She immediately turned her head and asked the maid beside her, "What's in that wooden box? Which store sent it?" The maid hurriedly whispered, "It's a skincare product sent by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. It's called angel water. It is said that His Highness personally developed it." Angel water? This name is so special. The Duchess of Broglie didn't pay much attention to the statement that it was developed by the Crown Prince himself. She guessed that some skincare product workshop might be promoting it under the banner of the Crown Prince. When Queen Mary heard what she said, she immediately ordered her servants to bring a box of angel water and gave it to her generously. This stuff is pretty good, especially for getting rid of acne. The Duchess of Broglie was overjoyed, but pretended to refuse. "How can I ask for your things? I still have quite a few. Just take it." "Yes, I'll take it then. Thank you, Your Majesty." The ladies who were chatting next to them suddenly looked over, their eyes full of envy and jealousy, and they only hated themselves for not discovering the Queen's new equipment first. Queen Mary sensed that something was wrong in the atmosphere and smiled and asked her maid, de Benenac, to give a box to everyone present, and all the ladies were happy. Soon, the news that the Queen was using the trendy skincare product angel water spread quickly. In the Palace of Versailles, like ink dripping in water by dusk, almost all the aristocratic women were asking around where they could buy angel water, especially the young girls, who were going crazy. The reason was naturally that they heard that angel water was the king's, developed by His Highness the Prince himself. If I don't buy a bottle right away, I'll be embarrassed to say that His Highness is the lover of my dreams. Finally, someone found out the original source of angel water. It was given to the Queen by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. Immediately, someone else paid 50 livres as a favor and received news from the Crown Prince's exclusive beautician that in the afternoon, 40 bottles of angel water were sent to a luxury store in Paris for consignment. It was completely dark at this time, and the noble ladies could not go out, so I don't know how many girls stayed up all night, eagerly looking forward to dawn. Only the assistant of the Dauphin's exclusive beautician looked at the 50 livre silver coin angrily. Why didn't that person come and ask me? He couldn't help but think of the time he took a carriage and visited luxury stores door to door in the afternoon, carrying that bag of angel water on his back. Especially the Silver Night perfume store that opened on the Champs-Élysées closest to the old palace. He discussed it carefully with the manager for a long time, but the other party insisted on charging him a monthly consignment fee of 100 livres, saying that it was their store regulations here. Even if he brought up the title of Crown Prince, the other party remained unmoved. Although this is one of the most famous shops in Paris, he did not dare to promise this fee for His Highness casually. In the end, he had no choice but to leave in anger. Fortunately, the manager of the smaller Source of Elegance perfume and cosmetics store not far across the street was easier to talk to, so he left all the 5 bottles of angel water that were supposed to be sold on consignment at the Silver Night here. By the time he completed the consignment task and returned to the Palace of Versailles, it was already dusk, but no one asked him about the consignment of angel water with 50 livres. Early the next morning, countless carriages hurriedly left the Palace of Versailles and headed for Paris in the splendid high-end jewelry store next to the Louvre Museum. A lady's maid saw the small wooden box with the words angel water stamped on it in the window and immediately exclaimed with joy, "Ma'am, there it happened that 2 aristocratic ladies of 17 or 18 years old came in." After hearing this, they ignored the etiquette and rushed to the window in a few steps and said in a sharp voice, "Quick, this is it, I bought it." The noble lady was stunned, then stepped forward without any explanation, grabbed the clerk, and said without any doubt, "I wanted 10 bottles." The clerk said extremely apologetically, "Madam, our store only has 5 bottles of this angel water. I want them all." The noble lady responded very quickly, "No, I was here first. Give it to me. How much is it?" The clerk carefully pulled away from the two groups and said, 15 livres per bottle, 75 livres in total. The noble lady immediately said, "I'll pay you 80 livres. Give it to me." The lady glanced at the two of them with disdain. "Am I afraid of you two little girls?" He immediately calmed down and said calmly, 90 livres. I bought it. 100 livres. 120 livres. In the end, it was the noble lady who was richer, pocketing 5 bottles of angel water for 150 livres. With a smile of victory, she proudly walked out of the store in front of the two little girls. At the same time, 5 or 6 groups of aristocratic ladies walked into the Silver Night perfume store on the Champs-Élysées and asked if there was angel water for sale, because this is the most famous luxury perfume store in Paris, and angel water is available and the possibility of selling here is great. However, the Silver Night's manager could only watch them leave in disappointment with a grimace, mentally scolding himself several times for yesterday afternoon. Not long after, in the Source of Elegance store, an extremely cruel battle began, thanks to book friends 202307072107387333. Han Heo, book friends 202305100717098114. Dun 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 huh. Book friends 202008091535099934. Waiting for Darkness 419 for voting for this book. Your support is the motivation for writing. The author is grateful. Chapter 33 Paris Angel Trading Company. The pace of life in the 18th century was as slow as clouds moving in the sky. Although Joseph knew about the ladies in the Palace of Versailles rushing to buy angel water, the news from the store was not brought back until the next night by the beautician's assistant. So, a total of 1,460 livres were sold. Joseph looked at the young man in surprise. 40 bottles, yes, your highness. Those ladies and ladies are all rushing to buy it at a higher price. It is impossible to buy it at the original price. I heard that in the Source of Elegance store, their entourage almost got into a fight. Joseph sighed. It was a mistake. It was sold cheaply. It seems that my heart is still not dark enough. I still don't know enough about the weight of ladies' purses. I still don't trust the Queen's influence in the fashion industry. After learning from the pain, he had to correct his mistakes. Joseph immediately decided to raise the price. Of course, you cannot directly mark the original product with a high price, otherwise it will look too ugly. Joseph realized that the previous business plan was too hasty and failed to develop the commercial value of angel water. He immediately returned to the study and started writing quickly. He wrote more than 10 pages in a row and revised it several times before he was satisfied and stopped. In the business plan in front of him, the previous version of angel water was discontinued as a taste version, and the official version of angel water was divided into 3 grades: luxury version, hardcover version, and ordinary version. Segment the market and harvest ladies with different spending abilities. The ingredients and packaging of the regular version are the same as before. The capacity is reduced to 4 ounces, and the price is 14 livres. The hardcover version is based on this. Add some olive oil, puts it in a heart-shaped glass bottle, and has a brass box as the outer packaging. It sells for 26 livres for 4 ounces, based on the hardcover version. The luxury version adds a small amount of lanolin, and adds several scents of lavender, jasmine, and immortelle. In fact, it means changing different types of essential oils, and the bottle uses the flower shape of the scent, and the outer packaging of the sterling silver box, priced at 50 livres for 4 ounces. In addition, a series of angel water products must be developed. His first choice is facial mask. He had seen facial masks of this era, most of which were applied directly on the face, or fastened on the face with something like a mask. The disposable masks made of cloth that exposed the eyes, nose and mouth had not yet appeared in later generations, and this thing is very simple to make. Just customize some pieces of cloth in the shape of human faces and soak them in angel water without thickening agent. Just looking at the madness of the ladies of the Palace of Versailles for beauty products in the past 2 days, it can be predicted that the market for facial masks will definitely not be bad. Joseph also divided the facial masks into 3 levels. The luxury version is made of silk, the hardcover version is made of wool, and the ordinary version is made of cotton. It is a disposable product and should be thrown away after use. The prices are respectively 5 livres, 3 livres and 2 livres a piece. In addition, the product line also includes hand cream, foot cream, toner. In fact, it is just a matter of adjusting the ratio of glycerine and salicin on the basis of angel water, or adding more lanolin. If you change the packaging and name, it will be another product, which is a common cosmetic routine of later generations on the basis of enriching the product line. Joseph also reformulated the marketing plan. It is definitely not possible to rely on consignment. Only direct sales stores are professional enough. A VIP membership system is implemented, which is divided into gold card membership, silver card membership and ordinary card membership. The membership cards of the first 2 are made of real gold and silver, which is full of ceremony and focuses on luxury. Finally, the licensed franchise store model spread throughout Europe. Joseph looked at the pile of business plans and realized that this was no longer something he could just do by himself. It takes a company and a large number of employees to support such a large store. He immediately called all his followers and began assigning tasks to them. The accountant led people to purchase raw materials such as glycerine, as well as customize bottles and outer packaging. This time, they had to sign long-term contracts with suppliers to ensure a stable supply of goods. The beautician and several maids were responsible for filling the angel water. Currently, it is put on the market at a capacity of 200 bottles per day, and the volume will be increased when the specialty stores are ready. The lawyer went to register a company in Joseph's name. At this point, Joseph, who had difficulty naming, paused again. After thinking for a long time, he felt that the connection with angel water should be highlighted, so the company name was finally decided as Paris Angel Trading Company. As for the company's venue, recruitment, management, employees and other matters, he is not worried. All bottles and packaging used in cosmetics are customized from stores in Paris. Raw materials such as glycerine and essential oils are readily available on the market. The company Angel of France is actually only responsible for the final step of filling, packaging, and sales job. These tasks require no technical skills, so workers can be easily recruited. As for management and sales, Paris, one of the most commercially developed cities in Europe, has an abundance of such talents. Moreover, most of the crown prince's exclusive entourage are idle. If there is really a shortage of people, they can be used to temporarily support them. The only core technology of all products, salicin, was firmly in Joseph's hands. Even Lamech didn't know that what he was processing for the crown prince was actually a cosmetic raw material. Therefore, even if all those recruited rebel, it is impossible to reproduce even a drop of angel water. After arranging the work, Joseph was free again. Seeing that it was still early, he asked Emin to prepare a car and go to Paris, intending to choose the location for the store himself. The carriage bumped along for several hours, and just after noon, it entered the city of Paris. Emin suddenly pointed out the car window and said, "Your Highness, your perfume workshop. Oh, it has been converted into a pharmaceutical workshop now." "Right there, sure enough." Joseph saw a large courtyard in the distance, close to a tributary of the Seine River, and a huge water wheel was slowly turning on the east side of the courtyard. He said to Emin, "Let's go over and have a look." "Yes, Your Highness." The yard is very large, with more than a dozen houses in it, and a piece of land as big as 2 basketball courts. Seeing the temperament and dress of Joseph and his party, the gatekeeper did not dare to stop them, but even led them into the courtyard diligently. Soon, Lamech came out wrapped in an apron, saluted Joseph and said, "Your Highness, why are you here?" Joseph returned the favor with a smile. "I want to open a store in Paris, so I'll drop by to see you. Thank you for your concern, Your Highness." Lamech said, "Actually, I happen to have something to discuss with you." "Oh, what's the matter? Please tell me." Lamech raised his hand and gestured towards the workshop. "There used to be more than 40 workers here, but purifying salicin does not require so many people. Do you think we should fire them, or divide some of them to continue making perfume? Having more people is a good thing." Joseph immediately ordered, "You can neither fire people nor make perfume. You can purchase some more equipment and continue to expand salicin production, and they will have something to do." His goal is to build Paris Angel into a luxury goods empire that sells throughout Europe and lands in the Americas. The demand for core raw materials is absolutely huge. Because this book is being recommended for new books, it is very important for young authors. I urge readers to save it, vote for recommendations, monthly votes, and leave messages. The young author is grateful. Your support is the motivation for me to code. Reader group 1,036,217,580. Everyone is welcome to join the group and chat and discuss together. Chapter 34 Secret Weapon. Lamech looked at Dr. Larceny next to him with a somewhat unnatural expression. The latter took a step forward and said, "Your Highness, leave the rest to me." "Well, Mr. Lamech will be leaving here in the next few days." "Leave," Larceny said. "Actually, Mr. Lamech has received special funding from the French Medical Association and is planning to go to South America to conduct plant research. You know, there are many incredible plants there, and maybe new medicines can be discovered." In fact, he had resigned from his job as palace doctor. As for the technique of purifying salicin, he has already taught me in detail. In other words, he has nothing to do in the workshop. Lamech coughed lightly and bowed very sincerely. "Your Highness, I'm really sorry. To be honest, a large part of the reason why I was able to obtain this funding was because the medical association read my paper on the efficacy of salicin." "Oh, and you were the first signatory of the paper. But the opportunity to go to South America is really great. It's very rare." I think only then did Joseph remember that he had indeed received a letter from the medical association 2 days ago, saying that it was in recognition of his contribution to salicin. He didn't pay much attention to it at the time. It turned out that it was because of Lamech's paper. If it were before, he would definitely congratulate Lamech and send him off to South America in person. But today, after seeing the professional processing and experimental equipment in the workshop, as well as a large number of skilled workers, he had other ideas. That was to try and produce the legendary drug that he had been thinking about since he came to this world. Penicillin point. If you have penicillin, first of all, your pneumonia can be cured. Secondly, this miracle drug has very important military uses. In the wars of the 18th century, injuries were almost fatal due to wound infection, but penicillin can cure the disease. The injured were resurrected. It is conceivable that the wounded on one side of the war continue to return to the battlefield, while the other side continues to reduce its numbers. How can the war on the latter side be fought? He has had the idea of making penicillin for a long time, but the manufacturing process and technology of this thing are very complicated. Not only does it require an extremely professional laboratory, as well as experimental and culture equipment, but also a professional experimental team to operate it, so that it can be successfully trial produced. These conditions did not exist before, but now they are possible, and that is the pharmaceutical workshop in front of them point. As long as we add some experimental equipment, plus Lamech, a biomedical expert, and the workers here, penicillin may be able to appear more than 100 years ahead of schedule. Therefore, Lamech cannot be let go now. Point. Thinking of this, Joseph shook his head and said, "No, you don't need to apologize. It was my lack of consideration. Your stage should not be limited to the small pharmaceutical factory. Those unknown areas of biomedicine are where you can show your skills." Lamech said with emotion, "Thank you for your understanding. Please believe that I will come back at any time if there is any use for me here." Joseph smiled slightly and said casually, "I'm just a little sorry. I originally wanted you to help trial a new drug, but now it seems that I can only wait for you to come back from South America." Hearing new medicine, Lamech immediately became interested. "Oh, I wonder what kind of medicine His Highness is talking about." Joseph originally wanted to talk about penicillin directly, but then he thought that the preliminary preparations for making this thing would take a lot of time. It was better to take out a gadget for Lamech to warm up first, and also to train the experimental team point. So he temporarily pressed the penicillin button and said, "I've heard of a drug that can delay aging, treat miscarriage, and even make a man's penis, ahem, worse." Lamech searched the database in his brain and found nothing that matched this description. He was about to shake his head in denial when he suddenly remembered the magical salicin. He quickly put away his contempt and asked, "This is incredible. Are you sure there really is such a thing? It can't be wrong." Joseph nodded. "It also has a special name, called tocopherol. The so-called tocopherol is vitamin E, which was very common in later generations, but had not been refined in the 18th century. Point. The reason why he chose vitamin E was because it was relatively simple to extract and had a high success rate. Secondly, it can be mixed into makeup. Vitamin E will be added to almost all skincare products related to anti-aging and pigment suppression in the future. Point. This will be the second secret weapon used by the Paris Angel Company to squeeze the wallets of ladies." Lamech became even more serious when he heard such a professional name. "Your Highness, do you know how to get this?" "Ah, tocopherol," Joseph affirmed. "I know a method to extract tocopherol from corn cobs, which requires the purchase of some additional equipment, such as centrifuges, sedimentation dishes, etc. Oh, and the construction of a constant temperature room." "A constant temperature room? Is it a laboratory that maintains a fixed temperature? How can this be done in this era without air conditioning? It is really not easy to maintain a constant temperature." Point. Joseph thought for a while and said, "Lay dense water pipes under the floor and in the walls of the room, and build a large water tank outside to connect these pipes. When the temperature needs to be raised, the water tank will be heated. If the temperature needs to be cooled, water from the Seine River will be introduced. This water wheel can just come in handy. Even in summer, the temperature of the river water can be kept below 20 degrees, which is enough for biological cultivation." Point. Lamech was obviously interested in this substance that could delay aging, but on the other hand, it was also his long-cherished wish to go to South America to investigate plants. He stood there for a while, seemingly in a dilemma. Point. Joseph saw his hesitation and immediately threw out bigger bait. "Mr. Lamech, after having the thermostatic chamber and other facilities, I actually have a more magical drug that I need your help to trial produce. This medicine can treat pneumonia, wound infections, puerperal fever and other diseases, and even cure terminal diseases such as the Black Death. syphilis, and sepsis. Lamech was stunned. If there is such a medicine, wouldn't it be a realization of my lifelong dream, so that no one in the world will die in pain due to disease? He was so excited that his breathing quickened. Your Highness, are you kidding? Seeing that he had bitten the hook, Joseph smiled and said, after you make this medicine, won't you know, if you try it, by the way, I will support you with a sum of money in the future to go to South America. It will definitely be higher than what medicine will give you, and at the same time, you will have greater freedom. Having said this, Lamech hesitated any longer and nodded vigorously. Your Highness, I will definitely do my best to work with you to create that magical medicine. After Joseph left Lamech the method for refining vitamin E, he left the workshop. By the time his carriage arrived at Paris City Hall, it was already past 3 p.m. and came out of the City Hall, waved his hand to the fat man behind him and said, no need to trouble you, please go back. The man had no choice but to turn around and return to the City Hall angrily. Emin came to the carriage on the other side of the road and bowed to Joseph. Your Highness, I have already asked clearly. Among the properties registered for sale in Paris, there are 14 properties that meet your requirements. Place, Joseph said without hesitation. Want the best, Your Highness? That should be the Nagel Jewelry Store on the Champs-Élysées, because this book is being recommended for new books. It is very important for young authors. I urge readers to save it, vote for recommendations, monthly votes, and leave messages. The young author is grateful. Your support is the motivation for me to code. Reader group 1,036,217,580. Everyone is welcome to join the group and chat and discuss together. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35 Under the City of Amsterdam. In the middle section of the Champs-Élysées, it is 600 meters away from the Tuileries Palace. Looking south towards the Louvre Museum point in front of Joseph was a jewelry store with a shop area of about 20 meters wide. However, the door was ajar at this time, and the signboard of Nagel Jewelry Store was still there. Point according to what Emin has learned, the owner of this store is married to a Spaniard, so he plans to sell the property and move to Spain. Point Joseph went into the store and took a look. The store was very new. It had 2 floors. Each floor was about 500 square meters. It had thick oak floors. The corners of the room and the stair handrails were all wrapped in brass. The decoration was very elegant, showing a kind of restraint and exquisite beauty. Point without much delay, he quickly reached an agreement with the owner's client and bought the store for 36,000 livres. This price is relatively reasonable for this most prosperous commercial district in Paris. Emin went to complete the transaction procedures while Joseph looked around and said to the architect, who came with him, Mr. Orchard, I also need your help to make some adjustments to this store. Yes, the Crown Prince also has an architect in his exclusive entourage. He usually has nothing to do, but today he finally came into use. Please do as you wish, Your Highness. Joseph pointed to the wall facing the street. These walls are all replaced with glass. The bigger the better, so that pedestrians can see the store at a glance on the street. All these wooden containers were replaced, and some 1-meter high glass display cabinets were customized. From now on, the products will be placed directly on them, so that customers can touch them at any time. The lights also need to be replaced, using the crystal chandeliers in my living room. To ensure absolute lighting, every corner of the store must be brightly lit. The exterior walls are all painted in fresh and soft tones. Orchard kept recording in his notebook until Joseph turned to him and asked, that's basically it. How long does it take to complete these changes? How much does it cost? The architect hurriedly looked through the records and said hesitantly, about half a month. It will cost 3,000 livres. Joseph nodded. I'll give you 5,000 livres and finish it within a week. Can you do it? Yes, Your Highness. I will try my best to complete it. Orchard thought for a moment and then said, Your Highness, Please excuse me for saying that, even if angel water is placed in the grocery store in Zinculo, it will be sold out. And this store is already very good. Why do you need to spend so much money to decorate it? Joseph smiled and said, because in addition to angel water, this store also sells products. Orchard was a little surprised. You want to sell this store? No, I'm talking about another form of merchandise. Just treat this store as a sample. Netherlands in a military camp 4 kilometers south of Amsterdam. An old man wearing a long green military uniform with half white hair and a chin slightly tilted to the left frowned and looked at the map. After a long while, he finally said, I think we should abandon Amstelveen now and retreat south of Amsterdam to use the river. Stop. The middle-aged man in a dark white military uniform beside him immediately interrupted him loudly and said in a sarcastic tone, Colonel Wooster, my boys and I have traveled thousands of miles to come to the Netherlands not to see you. The army practices evade the enemy tactics. Wooster was very vocal in the Dutch army, but facing the soldier with only the rank of captain in front of him, he did not dare to get angry. He just emphasized his tone and said, Mr. De Boyce, the Prussian army's forward is only 15 meters away from Amstelveen kilometers, and there is no fortress to defend in the entire town. Do we have to wait here to die? Amstelveen is a town immediately south of Amsterdam. If this place is lost, Amsterdam will be completely exposed to the Prussian army. The French captain continued to say sarcastically, fortress? Your army can't even defend a fortress as strong as Utrecht. Even if Amstelveen has 10 fortresses, I'm afraid it won't be of much help to you. Wooster's face turned red. What's the use of talking about this? The most important thing now is to decide how to fight the enemy. Offensive. Du Bois shouted. French soldiers have always used offense to crush the enemy. A Dutch officer next to him hurriedly said, Mr. De Bois, including the temporarily recruited soldiers, our total number is only more than 9,000, but the Prussian army opposite has more than 20,000. In this case, attacking is tantamount to suicide. Du Bois smiled. 20,000 is the number of Prussian troops, and they certainly don't have that many forwards who can get here. More importantly, thanks to the fact that you retreated too quickly, the Prussian army pursued them at high speed for more than 10 days. Since the Dutch waterways are dense, most of their artillery cannot keep up with the forward troops, and we have more than 10 cannons. Wooster looked at him with wide eyes. Do you really want to attack the Prussian army? Why not? Du Bois also looked back at him. The Prussian army must not have expected that the Dutch army, which had been retreating, would dare to suddenly counterattack and thus neglect to take precautions. This is our opportunity. Wooster felt a little uncomfortable being stared at by him and lowered his head and said, no matter how brave your soldiers are, even if they are equipped with cannons, they attack so rashly. Du Bois shook his head and said, no, not my soldiers, but yours, me, my people. How can this be done? Du Bois interrupted him again. It's your people, and you have to use new soldiers to attack the Prussian forwards. Then let them pretend to be defeated. Oh, they should definitely be defeated, and my men and your main force will wait for the Prussians to catch up in the narrow area between the Sibera River and Lake Abcord. All my artillery will be deployed here. Several Dutch officers' eyes lit up when they heard this, and the image of the Prussian army being suddenly ambushed and fleeing in a panic appeared in their minds. They have never won a battle since Prussia intervened in the Netherlands, and they are extremely eager to win at this moment. Wooster frowned and shook his head. Even if we can really defeat the Prussian forward, it will be useless. Their main force will arrive soon, and we will not be able to hold on by then. The task given to me by the Federal Provincial Council must be adhered to for 5 days. Du Bois corrected him. Before we can hold on for 5 days, we need to win a battle to repel the Prussian attack. Otherwise, if you retreat all the way to Haarlem, you will be able to hold for more than a week. He said and looked at the young officer with curly hair and a sword-like nose standing aside. Andre. Note 1. How long do you think it will take for the main Prussian army to arrive in Amsterdam? The young officer held his head high and said, sir, if we let them march, they will be able to cross Amstelveen before dark tomorrow. But if their logistics supply line can be disturbed, then this time will be greatly delayed. Very good. Du Bois cast an approving look. Then I'll leave this task to you. Yes. Walster was surprised and said, Second Lieutenant Davout only has more than 60 cavalry. How can he attack the Prussian supply line? No, more than 60 people. Du Bois smiled and shook his head. And your 650 cavalry. Note 1. Andre Davout is a fictional character requested by readers and is said to be the brother of the famous historical general Louis Nicolas Davout. Because this book is being recommended for new books, it is very important for young authors. I urge readers to save it, vote for recommendations, monthly votes, and leave messages. The young author is grateful. Your support is the motivation for me to code. Reader group 1,036,217,580. Everyone is welcome to join the group and chat and discuss together. Chapter 36 Blood and Courage. 650? Walster immediately protested. That's all my cavalry. You have no right to mobilize them, Captain. Du Bois did not allow him to finish, but smiled and said, Give me your cavalry, or you can face the Prussians alone. No, don't. The commander-in-chief of the Dutch army waved his hand in frustration. The cavalry is under your command. We cannot fight among ourselves at this time. Exactly. The right decision. Du Bois turned to the curly-haired French lieutenant and said, Andre, act according to the original plan. How soon can you set off? Andre raised his hat and saluted. Yes. My people have completed all preparations and are ready to leave at any time. However, the Dutch cavalry may still need some time. Du Bois nodded. Now those people are under your command. Go and teach them how to improve their efficiency. Yes. The cavalry lieutenant left, and Du Bois looked at the Dutch officers in the military tent. So, now everyone agrees to take the initiative to attack the Prussian forward. Everyone nodded silently. Very good, thank you all. Du Bois came to the map and pointed to the location of the Sibera River. Mr. Walster, please deploy the Hague Guards here. The Dutch officer said with some dissatisfaction. There are no guards anymore. They are all the troops of the Provincial Federation Council. Du Bois nodded indifferently. Okay, no matter what they are called, in short, they will mix with my artillery and wait for the Prussian forward here. The Freedom Corps formed an array 200 meters to the south to accept the first wave of attacks from the Prussian army. The so-called Free Corps is a militia group formed by the Dutch Patriot Party, and the Hague Guards are the elite troops of the original William V. The combat effectiveness of the two is self-evident. Of course, these Praetorian Guards also participated in the exile of William V, so there is no doubt about their loyalty to the United Provincial Congress. A Dutch officer immediately objected. You are letting the Free Corps be used as cannon fodder. Why don't the French go to the front? Walster raised his hand to stop him. Captain Du Bois is right. Without the veterans to hold the line back, the Free Corps will soon collapse in front of the Prussian army. Du Bois said calmly, the Free Corps don't have to fight to the death with the Prussians. After the battle, they just have to move to both sides. What I'm worried about is their level of training, and whether they can complete their tactical arrangements without falling into chaos. Walster suddenly puffed up his chest and said solemnly, I will personally command the Freedom Corps. Du Bois nodded and continued, from now on, let's do this. Under his pencil sketch, the area less than 5 kilometers wide between the Sibera River and Lake Abcord on the map was already marked with Dutch and French troops south side of Amstelveen. Report. A ranger came to Andre, circled the horse's reins, raised his hat and saluted. The Prussian army was found 3 kilometers away on the east side. More than 4,000 people, mainly infantry, but also a small amount of cavalry. Andre nodded. This should be the Prussian forward. He immediately turned around and ordered, move the entire army 1 kilometer west, move quietly and slowly, and pay attention to the Prussian reconnaissance scouts. Yes, Andre looked at his pocket watch, then took out the map to check. According to previous intelligence, the main force of the Prussian army was 15 kilometers away from here, just downstream of the Sibera River. At the current speed, they would be able to bypass them at noon tomorrow point as he expected. At 2 p.m. the next day, the Rangers discovered a large Prussian convoy, but there were more than 3,000 Prussian troops protecting the convoy point and reordered the entire army to line up on the west side of the Sibera River, and then he noticed that his palms were full of sweat. He had just graduated from the military academy less than 2 years ago. This was his first time actually commanding a battle. It was impossible not to be nervous. Originally he was just the deputy of this cavalry company, but the company commander contracted dysentery on the way to the Netherlands and returned to France for treatment. So he was ordered to become the commander of the cavalry company of French volunteers. He looked at the plains and rivers in the distance and suddenly became worried. He is not afraid of confronting the Prussians, not to mention that it is just a harassment mission at the moment. Even if it is a decisive battle, he is confident that he will use his glorious blood and fearless courage to defeat the enemy. 5 days. Even if he died in battle, he firmly believed that his sword would lie between his body and the Prussian army. What he was worried about was 5 days from now. After French volunteers and Dutch troops held off the Prussians for 5 days, would the Prussians really retreat? My uncle learned through internal connections that this action plan was formulated by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, a military plan of a 13-year-old boy. Andre tried not to think too much. He was not afraid of death. Death on the battlefield was the fate of a soldier. What he was afraid of was a meaningless death, especially since he came to the Netherlands as a private person. If he failed to save the Patriot Party in the end, the military would not even admit that he had sacrificed his life for the country. I hope that son of the gods is really as magical as everyone says. After an unknown amount of time, the ranger's voice interrupted his thoughts. Report, the Prussian army convoy is coming. Andre's eyes flashed. He waved forward and shouted, attack. The French cavalry company was in the front, and the Dutch former Imperial Guard cavalry was in the rear, rushing towards the Prussian baggage train. While the distance was still far away, sharp trumpets were heard from the Prussian army. A large number of infantry quickly gathered and formed a dense line formation with their backs on the convoy, their muskets and bayonets pointed forward, ready to stand ready. The smoke was billowing, and the horses' hooves were rumbling. Andre could only see the densely packed Prussian soldiers from a distance, so he raised his Cholville 1728 short carbine and fired a shot towards the Prussian army. The cavalry behind him also fired their guns, and there was a loud bang, and the battlefield was suddenly filled with smoke. However, they were still 400 meters away from the Prussian army at this time, and the bullets could not cause any damage at all. But the intensive gunfire still made the Prussian commander very nervous. The cavalry in front of him looked like there were nearly 1,000 people, and I was afraid they were not the main force of the Dutch army. Andre finished firing his gun and immediately led his cavalry to turn sharply south, galloping past more than 300 meters in front of the Prussian army's formation. The Prussian army waited for more than 20 minutes, but saw no enemy troops rushing up. They were cursing and preparing to close the team and continue on their way, when suddenly another large group of cavalry attacked from the side and rear, mixed with intensive gunfire. The Prussian commander's face turned dark, and he ordered to form a formation to attack, but the opponent's cavalry just circled in front of them and roared away again. The Prussians had too few cavalry to protect the convoy and were unable to pursue it. In this way, Andre commanded the cavalry to come and go, and came again, leaving the Prussians to form defensive formations. It was not until dark, when the main force of the Prussian cavalry arrived for reinforcement, that Andre finally gave up. Andre let the troops rest in a dense forest for a few hours, and immediately sent an order to head north overnight, heading straight to the main Prussian assembly area. 94 readers have already invested in this book. If 6 more big guys invest in this book, they can make a recommendation and make this book a seal level debut. Cheyenne Haitian begs for your investment. Chapter 37, The Dutch-Prussian War. 5 kilometers south of Amstelveen Point, outside the brightly lit Prussian army camp, Andre was directing the soldiers to remove the 2 gun barrels from their horses. Since it was a light cavalry attack, heavy cannons could not be carried. What Andre carried was a small 1-pound cannon weighing less than 200 kilograms, which could be carried on the back of a horse. He didn't even bring a gun mount, so he dug a hole in the ground and propped the gun barrel diagonally in the hole, without any hope of hitting the Prussian army. Load the gunpowder, load the ammunition, and light the fire. With 2 bangs, chaos suddenly broke out in the Prussian camp point. When the Prussians finally figured out the direction of the enemy attack, they immediately mobilized more than 10 cannons and began to fight back. Andre had already strapped the 1-pounder cannon back to his horse and under the cover of night headed south to Utrecht. The Duke of Braunschweig, the commander-in-chief of the Prussian army, did not sleep well all night. He was very surprised as to why the Dutch, who had been beaten to the point of being unable to fight back, would take the initiative. To provoke at dawn the next day, he sent his cavalry to search the area carefully to confirm that there was no enemy ambush, and then ordered to continue marching to Amsterdam. However, at this time, the Prussian forward troops were being attacked by the Dutch. Although the Prussian army did not expect that the enemy would take the initiative to attack, the Prussian army trained by Frederick II had extremely high military quality and launched a counter-attack almost immediately. The Dutch were still as vulnerable as ever. After about 20 people died, they began to flee. Prussian forward commander Blücher reacted very quickly and immediately led his troops in pursuit. Quickly arriving on the east shore of Lake Abcord. What appeared in front of him was a Dutch army line formation spanning several miles. This was the most common line infantry tactic used by infantry in the 18th century. All soldiers were 1 to 3 steps apart, and thousands of people lined up neatly. There are usually 3 or 4 rows of horizontal lines, standing straight and taking turns to shoot at the enemy with muskets. Blücher sneered secretly. Is this the purpose of the Dutch? Use the defeated army to lure me in, and then snipe me here. Humph, you underestimate the quality of the Prussian soldiers. He immediately issued an order, and the entire army stopped the pursuit and formed a line formation on the spot. There was also the Camber battalion and a company to attack in column. The Prussian army moved very quickly. It took only 20 minutes for more than 4,000 soldiers to complete their formation. More than 2,300 people formed a 1-kilometer long horizontal line facing the Dutch line. Behind them, 800 soldiers formed dozens of columns, ready to attack the enemy's line at any time. There are also nearly 200 cavalry on standby on both wings. Just the organizational discipline and action ability they displayed sent shivers down the spine of the Dutch opposite. As a burst of bugle sounded, the Prussian army's military drum beat a rapid beat, and the company commanders of each company waved forward almost simultaneously, giving the order to attack. At the same time, several 4-pound cannons sandwiched among the Prussian lines began to roar as the Prussian soldiers continued to move forward following the beat of the drums. The infantry lines on both sides got closer and closer. On the Dutch side, under the attack of artillery shells, some people began to show signs of retreating, but they were quickly pushed back by officers with sabers. Go back. When the two armies were about 100 meters apart, fire began to erupt from the Dutch line array, but the Prussians seemed to be setting off fireworks on the other side. Still approaching in an orderly manner, people kept falling in the Prussian formation, but they didn't even frown. When they were only 60 meters away, the drumming on the Prussian side stopped suddenly. Raise the gun, aim, shoot. As the officers issued continuous orders, the Prussian soldiers fired a volley very skillfully. More than 10 gaps suddenly appeared in the Dutch line array, and there were panic shouts everywhere. When the two sides began to shoot at each other, the huge gap in their military literacy became apparent. The Prussian army fired 5 times, and the Dutch army could only shoot 3 times. Moreover, the Prussian army moved neatly, and the entire line fired almost at the same time. However, the Dutch army was sparse, and there were even many soldiers who were nervous. Just shoot without aiming. After the Prussians fired more than 10 rounds, smoke covered the entire battlefield, and the Dutch began to retreat as a whole. Upon seeing this, Blücher ordered without hesitation, attack in column. Yes, with a burst of drum beats with a unique rhythm, more than 40 columns of the Prussian army rushed out fearlessly in the firelight, and at the same time, their own line also moved 10 steps forward. More than a dozen of the charging Prussian soldiers fell immediately, but they were in columns. The soldiers at the front blocked the bullets, while the teammates behind them were still trotting forward. The Dutch infantry line was quickly dispersed, and the soldiers fled in panic. However, they were quickly restrained by officers and separated in an orderly manner toward the east and west sides to avoid the Prussian army's sharp edge. Blücher observed with a telescope and pointed to the west. Cavalry pursuit. Yes, hiss. Observations were keen, and while Walster was commanding the east side, the west side was noticeably more chaotic. Blucher himself commanded the large forces and continued to advance. At this speed, Amstelveen will be captured today. However, just after all the Dutch soldiers left the frontal battlefield, rapid gunfire suddenly came from the front of the Prussian army. Several huge iron balls passed through the Prussian line array with a scream, bringing out a bloody mist in midair. After one of the iron balls hit the ground, it rolled more than 40 meters and crushed a commander's arm. After the calf, he stopped. Blucher's eyes suddenly jumped. Hearing the sound of the cannons, there were at least 10 cannons, and the caliber should be quite large. He marched in a hurry for several days, bringing only 5 4-pound cannons with him, and was suppressed almost instantly by the artillery fire from the opposite side. The momentum of the Prussian soldiers' attack suddenly stalled. Blucher hesitated, glanced at Amstelveen not far away, gritted his teeth, and ordered 1.5 battalions of the reserve to press forward. The Duke of Brunswick, commanding the main force of the Prussian army, had just been walking for 2 hours when he heard intensive artillery fire from the north. He couldn't help but frown slightly. All his own artillery was here, and Blucher only had 5 cannons. There could be such a big movement. In other words, is that a Dutch cannon? But their artillery was wiped out half a month ago. Even if they could get the cannon, they still didn't have the artillery. Artillery is the most difficult branch to train. Without several years of hard training and solid basic mathematics skills, you may not be able to hit even one shot. After firing dozens of shots, while the Duke of Brunswick was wondering, a messenger rushed over, saying that a large number of Dutch cavalry had appeared near Utrecht. The Duke of Brunswick felt nervous. Utrecht was his logistics base, and the food and baggage was transported from there to the front line every day. There was no room for loss. What on earth do the Dutch want to do? As an experienced commander, he quickly sneered and shook his head. He had an absolute military advantage, so why should he follow the enemy's lead? Thanks to book friend 201812191920382110 for your generous reward. The young author is grateful. Your support is my motivation for coding. Thanks again. Chapter 38 William II's decision. The Duke of Brunswick immediately ordered that the main force of the Prussian army defend on the spot, allowing Blucher to find out the enemy's situation as soon as possible and not to attack rashly, and then sent 3 infantry regiments and 1 cavalry regiment along Amstelveen to a defense line stretching 20 kilometers was built in Utrecht to protect logistics. Before noon, he received another bad news. Blucher's regiment engaged in a fierce battle with the Dutch on the Sibera River and suffered heavy shelling and double teaming by the enemy, resulting in more than 800 casualties. The Duke of Brunswick took a deep breath. Unexpectedly, the Dutch still had the energy to struggle and quickly sent people to pick up Blucher. It was already 2 days after the Prussian army's logistics defense line was completed and the forward troops were reorganized. The Duke of Brunswick didn't care about the wasted time. He had already plugged the loopholes caused by advancing too quickly in the early stage, and the next step was to crush the Dutch with absolutely superior force. At noon on the 4th day after Dubois repulsed the Prussian forward, he faced the Duke of Brunswick's most violent attack. On the plain south of Amstelveen, there is no strategy to be used, only a violent collision of iron and blood. Dubois commanded 12 cannons and continuously bombarded the most densely populated locations of Prussian soldiers. André also led the cavalry, constantly harassing the surrounding Prussian army, firmly attracting the attention of the Prussian cavalry. The Dutch occupied a higher ground. Encouraged by the great victory a few days ago, their morale was extremely high, and they unleashed an astonishing combat effectiveness. The Prussian army stormed until dark, but failed to break through the Dutch defense line. At dawn the next day, the Duke of Brunswick continued his attack. The two sides exchanged intensive musketry and shells, and thousands of corpses were soon left on the battlefield. The fighting was so fierce that before 2 p.m., the French artillery ran out of shells. André saw Captain Dubois withdrawing from the gun position with the artillery, holding a musket, and preparing to join the infantry, and he knew that the situation was not good. He looked at the cannons on the Prussian side that were still spitting out fire, crossed himself on his chest, raised his saber high, and shouted to the blood-covered soldiers behind him, "Follow me." break through the Prussian artillery positions. The French cavalry immediately hit the breastplate with the hilt of the sword and shouted angrily, "Yes!" The Duke of Brunswick frowned and looked at the smoke-filled battlefield. He did not expect that the Dutch resistance would be so tenacious, especially their artillery. Although the number of cannons was less than half of his own, they relied on their amazing shooting skills to defeat them. Evenly matched point according to the current situation. Taking Amsterdam will probably cost a lot, which has completely deviated from his original vision point. He was thinking about whether to use his reserves to launch the most violent attack, but the guards arrived with the king's envoy. The Duke of Brunswick looked at the withdrawal order signed by King William II, personally brought by the envoy, and frowned. What on earth is going on? The special envoy said awkwardly, "It has been confirmed that Princess Wilhelmina is not in the hands of the Dutch." What? This is impossible. The Duke of Brunswick's eyes widened. His purpose in this battle was to rescue Wilhelmina, but now he told him that she was not here. The special envoy said helplessly, "She was found in the southern Netherlands. It is said that she was kidnapped by a group of Italian-speaking kidnappers. The police in Antwerp rescued her and shot 2 of the kidnappers to death." The southern Netherlands he was talking about was what later became Belgium and is now the territory of Austria. Kidnapper? This is impossible. The special envoy continued, "Your Majesty, Princess Wilhelmina has returned to Prussia." The Duke of Brunswick looked at the withdrawal order again and said unwillingly, "Even so, we can take this opportunity to wipe out the rebels and let the Prince of Orange return to the Netherlands." The special envoy smiled awkwardly again. In fact, yesterday the Dutch parliament officially announced that it would accept the Prince of Orange to return to Amsterdam and resume his position as consul. The Duke of Brunswick was stunned for a long time, and finally waved to the herald next to him helplessly, "Order the entire army to retreat." It was naturally Joseph's arrangement for William V to return to the Netherlands. The Patriot Party flatly rejected this at first, but the French envoy Colbert relayed the words of the Crown Prince to them. The so-called consul can be a ceremonial position. You and I, instead of letting William V stir up trouble outside, it is better to take him back to Amsterdam and take care of him. William V's power is in The Hague, and you control the army, and you can even use him as a hostage. The Patriot Party then happily accepted this suggestion. 3 days ago, French spies set up an ambush in Nijmegen and kidnapped Wilhelmina on her way to church. The Prussian princess believed that her hiding place was undetected, so she went out with only 7 or 8 bodyguards. As a result, she was kidnapped by Italian-speaking kidnappers without much resistance. Although Prussia captured the southern Netherlands, it was only in the big cities, and the small towns and villages were still in the hands of the Patriots. Therefore, the French spies left the Netherlands unimpeded and brought Wilhelmina to the southern Netherlands. Send a letter demanding ransom to Wilhelmina. Later, the contact in Antwerp obtained 2 corpses to serve as the dead kidnappers, notified the local police that there were suspicious foreigners, and also found a newspaper reporter to follow and report. Wilhelmina, who was rescued by the police in public, could no longer pretend that she was being held hostage by the Patriot Party. The biggest excuse for King Wilhelm II of Prussia to send troops to the Netherlands disappeared. Then the Patriot Party expressed concessions, and France held a massive military exercise in southern Luxembourg. At the same time, the Duke of Brunswick failed to take over Amsterdam. Finally, William II looked at his poor money bag and decided to withdraw his troops. Henri looked at the thousands of enemy troops stationed around the Prussian artillery positions and the Prussian cavalry who were always staring at him. He knew that he would probably shed blood on the battlefield before he even touched the Prussian cannon. But this is the only way to save the crisis, and he will try it if there is only 1% chance. He gently pinched the horse's belly, gradually accelerating, and was about to approach the right wing of the Prussian infantry. Suddenly, a horn sounded from the Prussian army, and the Prussian infantry line began to retreat. He reined in his horse and stood there until the Prussians were almost out of sight and the Dutch around him began to cheer, and he was finally convinced that the enemy had retreated. He made a sign of the cross on his chest, looked up at the sky, and felt a surge in his chest. He is the Son of God. He really did it. At dawn, Joseph took the car and rushed to Paris. Today is the opening day of Paris Angel's store on the Champs-Élysées, and he will be there at noon. to cut the ribbon point. Although it is just a store opening, the store itself is also a commodity, so he naturally needs to have a sense of ceremony. To increase its added value point, the news of the opening had already been publicized through newspaper advertisements. When he arrived at the Champs-Élysées, the place was already crowded with people, especially the middle section of the avenue, where the new Paris Angel store was located, which was completely impassable. I recommend a friend's new book, Princess Please Respect Yourself. It tells the history of the Middle Ages, which is very interesting. Introduction. In 1243, a Chinese named Daijun, for unknown reasons, traveled through the body of a man named Finn, and became a refugee, trying to survive in the barbaric and dark Middle Ages. No system, no golden fingers, nothing except the knowledge he brings in his head. He didn't know what happened to him. So he picked up the imperial princess on the roadside. What's even more outrageous is that Her Royal Highness the Princess seems to be interested in herself. Facing the imperial princess, Finn was in trouble for a while. Finn, I really like you. Let's get married. Princess, please respect yourself. Alias of this book, I had to be the emperor's consort when I traveled to the Middle Ages, and start with a bowl. I'm Zhuang of the West. Chapter 39, The Crown Prince's Blessing. Angel water was previously only popular within the Palace of Versailles, but after ladies tried it during this period, its miraculous effects have already spread throughout Paris nowadays. No one in the entire aristocratic class of Paris knows about this magical cosmetic. Smooth acne in 2 days, smooth skin in 5 days, fade spots in 1 week, etc. are all proven by many people. Especially the advertisement that started to appear on the front pages of major newspapers 10 days ago, with only one line of large words on the entire page. Angel water, you deserve it. Simple and straightforward. Like a sharp arrow, it hits every woman's heart. Yes, although the noble and luxurious angel water is expensive, I deserve a bottle. If you turn to other pages of the newspaper, you will see the news about the grand opening of the Paris Angel store. It states that in the future, angel water will only be available in this store, and a large number of new products will be released here. It is scheduled to officially open at 12 noon. People have gathered outside the store before dawn in the morning, peering through the completely transparent glass exterior wall to look at the products displayed inside. Joseph frowned and looked at the streets that were crowded with people waiting to open the store. Although he was the store owner, he couldn't get close to the store door at all. It wasn't until Quesold ordered the guards to step down to maintain order that a narrow passage appeared on the Champs-Élysées at 12 o'clock sharp. More than a dozen clerks who were over 1.8 meters tall, blonde and blue-eyed, handsome in appearance, and wearing crisp bright red terry uniforms walked out of the Paris Angel store. They stood in 2 neat rows at the entrance of the store filled with flowers. The band behind them played cheerful celebration music. 2 slim girls pulled up a red ribbon with a flower ball in the middle and laid it across the front of the store. The manager of the specialty store came to the front, bowed first, and then said loudly, I would like to invite the son of God in Versailles, His Royal Highness the Crown Prince of France, to cut the ribbon for our store. The Champs-Élysées suddenly burst into cheers. People just saw the royal guards maintaining order and guessed that someone important might be coming, but they didn't expect that the crown prince was coming in person. Joseph, dressed in fine clothes, walked out of the store, waved to everyone, and announced loudly, today, the first store belonging to Paris Angel Company officially opened. The mission of Paris Angel is to enable every French woman to stay young and beautiful forever. Happy shopping, everyone. The crowd was restless and cheering again, and some fans even started shouting, long live the crown prince. Joseph took the scissors from the manager, cut the red ribbon in front of him, and then quickly escaped from the scene through the back door under the cover of Quesold. He had no choice. He was afraid that, if he walked slower, he would be surrounded and swallowed by those noble ladies with stars in their eyes. Someone was throwing petals all over the place, and the manager smiled and signaled that everyone could enter the store to buy. People were talking about the novel opening ceremony and rushed into the store. Almost instantly, the store, with a total of more than 1,000 square meters on the upper and lower floors, was crowded with customers, but there were also thousands of people gathered outside the store, anxiously waiting for people inside to come out. A young girl with a tall figure and elegant curves, wearing a dark blue dress and a wide-brimmed hat with a gauze hanging from the edge to cover her face, looked at the crowds of people outside the Angel store in Paris. She couldn't help but frown slightly and complained softly, "Why are there so many people? If I had known earlier, I would have asked Mr. Balvito to buy it." She touched the barely distinguishable pimple marks on her cheeks, as if she had made up her mind. A few days ago, one of her best friends gave her a small half bottle of angel water, which is said to be the most popular skincare product at the moment. After just a few uses, her extremely troubled acne significantly subsided. But that little bit of angel water was about to run out. "For the sake of my pretty face, I would buy another bottle no matter what." She took a look at the Paris Angel store, then walked quickly towards the back of the store with her long legs. Joseph came out of the back door of the specialty store. The carriage was already waiting here. He was about to get on the carriage when he suddenly saw an 8 or 9-year-old boy with disheveled hair and dirty body at the entrance of the alley. He was praying pitifully, "Honorable Lord and Madam, please reward me with a few coins." The little boy glanced at the smaller girl leaning against the wall, and his voice became anxious. "Please, for only 5 deniers, let me buy a crown prince's blessing for my sister. Please, she has been burning all day long." However, there were no pedestrians in this alley, and even if 2 people occasionally passed by in a hurry, they didn't even look at him. Joseph walked over and put 2 silver coins in the broken jar held by the boy. The boy immediately knelt down excitedly and said in a choked voice, "Thank you, sir, thank you. May the Lord bless you." Kesod helped him up first. Joseph said, "It's nothing. Go and see your sister. By the way, what is the crown prince's blessing you just mentioned?" The boy hurriedly said, "Honorable sir, it's that little pill called Shu Yang or something like that. It can save lives and it's very cheap. I heard that this medicine was invented by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince, so everyone calls it the Crown Prince's blessing." Joseph signaled to Eamon, who immediately took a few pills of salicin. Joseph had also been using salicin to control his pneumonia. "Is this the medicine?" Joseph handed the light yellow pill to the boy. "Yes, this is it." The boy was overjoyed. He leaned over and fed a pill into his sister's mouth. He also gave her some water and nodded vigorously at her. "Swallow it. You will feel less uncomfortable soon after swallowing it." Seeing that he was about to kneel down again, Joseph hurriedly supported him and asked, "Where is your family?" The little boy forced out a broken smile. "They all got sick and died last year. Only my sister and I were fine." As he spoke, his stomach made a series of gurgling sounds. Joseph felt a bit sad and gave him some more money, but suddenly he saw a crowd of people rushing to buy angel water on the other side of the alley. It is better to teach people to fish than to teach them how to fish. He looked at the little boy. "Do you want to stop being hungry?" The boy nodded very seriously. "Let me teach you a way." Joseph pointed to the crowd. "There is a shop called Paris Angel over there. You use the money to buy some chairs and rent them outside the shop for 2 deniers an hour. Remember to collect a deposit. When you are familiar with the store, you can buy clean and neat clothes to change into. Then you can help those ladies who don't want to queue up, or you can buy them on your behalf. I estimate that you can charge 1 livre each time." The boy's eyes widened, and he saluted vigorously. "Thank you so much. You must be sent by the Lord to save my sister and me." Behind a raised wall pillar in the alley, a long-legged woman covered by gauze looked at Joseph from a distance and whispered to herself, "That person seems to be the Crown Prince. I didn't expect that he has a good heart. It seems that the royal family is not all poisonous snakes and parasites. Thank you to the boss Liuse Charming Eye for your generous reward. Your support is the motivation for me to code. Thank you very much. You must be sent by God to save the little author." Chapter 40 Hunger Marketing and Small Profits but Quick Turnover. The long-legged girl waited for Joseph's carriage to go away, then ducked to the back door of Paris Angel Company, looked around to make sure no one was there, leaned down and looked in through the keyhole, and saw an old janitor sitting at the entrance, staring listlessly. Hold the door. She observed the structure of the house, bit her red lips, moved to the entrance window next to her, pulled out a thin wire from her bun, stuck it in through the crack of the window, fiddled with it twice for some unknown reason, and then quietly opened it. She pushed the window open a little and jumped in gently. The doorman, who was less than 3 meters away from her, didn't notice at all. The girl raised her hand and threw a stone on the back door, making a soft click sound. The gatekeeper frowned and stood up to check. The girl took the opportunity to step forward, put her right hand on the back of the chair behind him, turned her body over like a civet, and disappeared at the end of the entrance hall in an instant. The gatekeeper seemed to feel a breeze blowing and turned around to look, but there was only an empty entrance hall. Passing through a warehouse, the long-legged girl effortless dodged several clerks and appeared in the sales area on the first floor of Paris Angel. There were a lot of people in the store, but fortunately the clerk had been controlling the number of people entering the store, so it wasn't too crowded. She glanced at the crowd of sardines outside the glass wall, smiled victoriously, and turned to look at the store that she had been curious about for a long time. Next to the door are 2 life-size oil paintings. The pretty women in the 2 paintings are almost identical, except that the skin color on the left is dull and there are a few pimples on the forehead. Next to it is a line of words before use. The woman in the oil painting on the right has smooth and fair skin, looking bright and attractive, and the words next to it are after use. The long-legged girl walked forward leisurely and found that there were no containers in the store, only more than a dozen chest-high stepped glass tables arranged in an orderly manner. On the glass table are various beautifully packaged cosmetics, and the small wooden signs next to them are marked with product names and prices, shining under the light of the crystal lamp on the roof. Accompanied by the gentle sound of piano playing all around, the place is filled with a dreamlike and upscale atmosphere. Even if you don't buy anything, just walking around this store is a good spiritual enjoyment. Face mask. She stopped in front of a cloth mask-like thing. What is this? A tall and handsome clerk came over immediately, bowed politely and said, "Miss, the facial mask is a new skincare product launched by our store. It can effectively..." The long-legged girl listened to his magnetic voice and glanced at his strong and straight neck and couldn't help but feel a little warm. Soon, the small bag in her hand was filled with angel water, facial masks, hand cream and a lot of other things. The rules of this store are very strange. Take the goods first and pay at the end. She looked at her little bag and sighed inwardly. She originally planned to buy only a bottle of angel water, but ended up buying so much. However, these things are really too tempting. A noble lady walked past her. The cosmetics in the 3 bags she was holding almost overflowed, and she muttered, "You can buy whatever you want without increasing the price." My god. The long-legged girl was instantly relieved. Look, no one can refuse these damn good things. She lingered in the store for nearly an hour before she was satisfied and ready to pay and leave. The handsome clerk told her that she could apply for a VIP card of the store and enjoy services such as free shipping and free writing of greeting cards. The silver card and gold cards also offer 15% off and 10% off. She asked carefully, "Then what kind of person can get a gold card?" "Oh, no, madam, anyone can apply for the card." The clerk replied with a smile. "You only need to deposit 1,000 livres in advance. The money is still yours. You can directly deduct the deposited amount when you shop in the future." The long-legged girl was frightened by the 1,000 livres and asked, "What about the silver card?" "Deposit 500 livres, my dear lady." "When?" The girl squeezed out of the crowd and turned around to look back at the Paris Angel sign. She suddenly stamped her feet with hatred. Damn it, she couldn't hold it back in the end. That VIP card cost a full 200 livres, and I won't be able to go to the opera or buy new shoes next month and the month after that. She murmured with a grimace. "If I had known, I should have accepted Mr. Weston's reward last time." She suddenly paused mid-sentence and looked at herself reflected in the glass seriously. "Sorrel, what are you thinking? You are not doing this for money, but for freedom and justice. Don't let money swallow you up, ideal." The next day, the general manager and store manager of Paris Angel Company arrived at the Palace of Versailles early in the morning and reported yesterday's sales to Joseph in his living room. The old man wearing glasses was originally the manager of the largest jewelry store in Paris. He was hired by the Paris Angel Company with a high salary. He held his account and read clearly. A total of 2,206 bottles of angel water, hand cream and other products were sold, and 2,110 facial masks were sold. There are 71 ordinary VIP cards, 35 silver cards, and 40 gold cards. He paused, put away his account, and continued. The total income is 126,562 livres. Although Joseph was mentally prepared, he was still surprised when he heard this number. How could this be opening a store? It was simply a money grab. He blurted out, 120,000? Are you sure? It's 120,000. The old man wearing glasses glanced nervously to the side. The middle-aged man with a flat nose and a slight limp next to him lowered his head and said in a deep voice, Your Highness, this is my mistake. I underestimated the sales volume and even lacked stock. After 5:30 p.m. yesterday, the store was full. The stock is out of stock, so the income may be less. Joseph coughed dryly and gave him a thumbs up in his heart. This was indeed the former general manager of Plymouth Shipyard that Eamon highly respected. He always felt that he was under-earning his boss. He nodded and said, Mr. Brent, this is actually quite good. Hunger marketing can increase customers' enthusiasm for purchasing. From now on, we will stock up on 95% of the expected sales volume. Hunger marketing. Although Brent didn't understand the meaning of the word, he immediately nodded and wrote down the Crown Prince's request. Joseph knew that this situation of selling 120,000 livres a day would be difficult to happen again in the future. After all, more than half of it was VIP recharge money, and they would not spend money to buy things later. In addition, after consumers' purchasing power is released this time, it will take a lot of time to use up the cosmetics they bought. However, it should not be difficult to sell 7,000 to 8,000 livres every day in the future, and the most important thing is that the brand effect of Paris Angel has been started. Be sure to make good use of this. He thought for a while and said to Brent, please contact the top workshops in Paris after you go back to customize a batch of jewelry, hats and shoes. They must use the best materials, the best workmanship, and the most fashionable styles, no matter the cost. The other thing is to sign a contract with the workshop. Everything made for Paris Angel cannot be made in the same style without the company's consent. Yes, Your Highness. Brent nodded and took note, then asked carefully, what is your plan? Mark these things with the Paris Angel mark and sell them in specialty stores. The price will be 3 to 5 times higher than the cost. Byproducts are mainly small profits but quick turnover. Dear readers, it is not easy for Cheyenne Haitian to write a book, especially because in the new book period, the book needs a lot of exposure before it can be recommended. So please promote the next book more. Please grab your friends and read this book together. Please introduce this book to more people to read. Cheyenne Haitian is grateful. Chapter 41 Absolute Monopoly. Brent's mind moved, and he immediately pictured in his mind the scenes of ladies bringing a hat or a pair of shoes after buying cosmetics, and he was immediately impressed by the Crown Prince's business acumen. On the side, the old man wearing glasses suggested, Your Highness, nearly half of the customers yesterday were aristocratic ladies from the Palace of Versailles. Do you think we should open a branch in the Palace of Versailles? It's not necessary. Joseph smiled and shook his head. Having them go all the way to Paris to buy them will better demonstrate the preciousness and irreplaceability of Parisian angels. At the same time, Parisian aristocrats will follow suit when they see them frequently coming in and out of our store. After talking about the merchandise sales, Brent added, Your Highness, in the past few days, 6 people including the Count of Alblaur, the Duke of Lavalier, and the Marquis of Mons have expressed interest in joining the Paris Angels. Take a look at this. Yes, from the first day of planning the store, Joseph planned to promote Paris Angels as a franchise chain. Opening stores one by one is not only slow, but also laborious. Before you open a few businesses, capitalists with a keen sense of smell will imitate your example and compete with you. Although Joseph has the core technology of salicylic acid and is not afraid of competition, he will be diverted from many customers after all. Therefore, He wants to use the franchise method to occupy the cosmetics market in France and even Europe as quickly as possible, so that Paris Angel will not leave any trace of its competitors in terms of product efficacy, publicity, and promotion, and market scale. Chance, anyway, there is no concept of anti-monopoly in this era. If we don't work hard to develop monopoly, wouldn't we be sorry for the gift of the times? Moreover, the profits of my cosmetics products are extremely high, about 800% to 1300%. Giving 1/5 of it to franchisees is completely acceptable to me, but for franchisees, they will already make a dream profit. Wake up with a smile. Finally, through the agents of Paris Angel, you can build a complete sales channel. If you develop other things in the future, you can also rely on this channel to quickly distribute goods and recover costs quickly. Joseph nodded and said to Brent, I will leave all the franchisee matters to you. I have written all the franchise conditions and negotiation skills in the document. I believe you have already memorized it. After the negotiation is completed, bring it to me. Just sign. Joseph would never underestimate the wisdom of people of this era. They just lacked vision and ideas of future generations. As long as they were taught these things, they would never do worse than those of later generations, especially someone like Brent who is a leader in his field of expertise. Joseph's future energy must not be wasted on the business operations of Paris Angels, so it is very necessary to train his subordinates as early as possible and delegate power to them. Thank you for your trust, Brent said, stroking his chest and bowing. I will definitely not let you down, Rue. Serpentine, Paris Angel Company headquarters in Paris, welcomed several heavyweight guests on this day, including the Count of Alblaur, the Duke of La Valliere, and the Marquis of Mons. These people are either old nobles with rich families or new capital upstarts who have made a lot of money. No matter which one, they are quite famous in the Paris business community. They are gathered here today for the same thing. To join Paris Angels, Brent first took everyone to visit the company's production workshop, which directly amazed these business elites. Where is the workshop? It is simply a magnificent villa. The workers' uniforms were clean and tidy. They sat on carved chairs and worked leisurely. Both the raw material warehouse and the filling table are made of high quality oak, with exquisite shape and spotless appearance. After looking at the production plant, Brent introduced them into the conference room. First put up a huge oil painting of the company's store, and said loudly, joining is actually very simple. It means that you can also own such an extraordinary store. Then, he smiled slightly. I know you must be worried that you may not be able to achieve such a superior effect. Please rest assured that you don't have to worry about the decoration, layout, etc. of the new store. All of this will be done by Paris Angel Company. What you get will be a store that is ready to open for business immediately. You don't even have to worry about everything from store management to store clerks. Paris Angel will help you train and supervise you, and even prepare employee uniforms for you. In other words, you just need to sign the franchise contract and count the money every day. Count Alblaur, Duke La Valliere and others all smiled knowingly. Brent immediately added, I can reveal a secret to you. The store opened by Paris Angel on the Champs-Élysées has a maximum sales volume of 126,000 livres in one day. Even the business elites, who had seen a lot of river, were so shocked that their eyes widened when they heard this. The one-day turnover of this store is even higher than the monthly income of the huge factory they own. Brent continued, the company will only open 3 franchise stores in the entire Paris, and the distance between each store cannot be less than half a league. 1 mile is 4 kilometers, and the distance between stores is more than 2 kilometers, which can fully ensure that they do not compete with each other for customers. Oh, for the first franchisee, the company will give a discount. The franchise fee is 150,000 livres. The subsequent franchise fees will become 180,000 livres. The price for franchisees outside Paris is 110,000 livres. Several business elites immediately started whispering among themselves. To be honest, this franchise policy and prospect are very attractive to them. After all, they have witnessed the amazing grand opening of the Champs-Élysées store, but they have never been exposed to this model of franchise, and they always have some concerns. The Duke of La Valliere, who has very deep nasolabial wrinkles, said, Mr. General Manager, who can say for sure what the current situation will be like? Today we can sell 120,000 yuan, but maybe tomorrow we can only sell 1,200 yuan. I'm pessimistic about profitability if, Your Majesty the Duke, you underestimate the ladies' obsession with beauty. They would rather be hungry than ignore their faces. I can assure you that there is no off-season for Parisian angels. Then, I hope to sell other products in the store. Count Albro said. Oh, you are making things difficult for me. While everyone was bargaining, a young man sitting in the corner clenched his fists. His name is Dauphin, and it has only been 3 years since he took over the family's textile industry. But just last year, the French government and the British signed a trade agreement, which reduced tariffs on almost all industrial products, to close to zero. Massive quantities of high quality and cheap British textiles poured into France, and his factory was immediately overwhelmed and unable to fight back. In just over a year, he lost more than half of his huge family fortune. Finally, he reluctantly packed up and sold the remaining 10 or so textile factories, preparing to call it quits and live out his days as a wealthy man. He originally didn't want to join the Paris Angels, but an old friend forced him to take a look. But at this time, he suddenly remembered the Paris Angels franchise advertisement in the newspaper. Maybe pessimists are always right, but only optimists can make money. Got the money. He stood up suddenly, stared at Brent and said, "Mr. General Manager, I have decided to join. As the first franchisee, I enjoy a discount of 150,000 yuan to open a store, so I want to invest 300,000 livres to open 2 franchises shop. Thank you. The 2 big guys from the society and 2-legged sheep game have generously rewarded me. The little author is grateful. Your support and encouragement are very important to me. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42 Loan Crisis. You will not regret today's decision. Manager Brent raised his hat and said in a very inflammatory tone, "Viscount Dauphin, congratulations on becoming a member of the Paris Angels." Count Alblo did not expect this young viscount to be so courageous, but he reacted very quickly and immediately said, "I have also decided to invest in a franchise store." "Oh, that's great, Lord Earl. Your investment vision is still as sharp as ever." The other people were stunned. 1 second they were still haggling, but the next second all 3 stores in Paris were divided up. You know, there is a saying nowadays, France actually only has 2 provinces, Paris and the rest. As the political, economic, and cultural center of France, Paris has much higher spending power than other regions. If someone invests a lot of money, it means that this business is definitely profitable. People who were still hesitant to wait and see now began to blame themselves and complained that they had no courage. But if you miss it once, you can't miss it the second time. Duke Lavalier followed. "I'll open a shop in Reims. My hometown is there. Ahem. I'll join too. I have some property in Marseille, so I'll invest in 2 stores there. I also invest in one." That night, at Brent's home, he kissed the 7 franchise contracts in his hand vigorously, shouting and dancing like crazy. Joining the Paris Angel Company is definitely the most correct decision he has ever made in his life. Just this afternoon, he has achieved financial freedom. Joseph promised to give him a commission of 3,000 livres for every franchise store he signs. In other words, he is now a rich man with a net worth of more than 20,000. He poured himself a glass of wine, took a big sip with the contracts, and happily planned. First, he would buy a villa in the Louvre area or the Saint-Germain area, and then go to Viscount Maciel's house to propose marriage to his son. That old money geek can no longer laugh at my family for being poorer than his. Haha. Joseph signed the contracts sent by Brent one by one, and he didn't feel too surprised. The profitability of Paris Angel can be seen by anyone with a discerning eye, and although the French government is poor, the private sector is still relatively wealthy, so there is no need to worry about no one investing in such a good project. The 7 stores are just the beginning. He predicts that after these franchise stores are opened, the demonstration effect will bring at least twice the number of franchisees. After Brent left, Joseph the second in command of France's finance, set off towards the finance minister's office point. As soon as he entered the door, all the officials in the room gathered around him and warmly saluted and congratulated him. "Your Highness, congratulations. Your Highness saved the Dutch. The Prussians just retreated in despair. Haha. The divine son of France, finance." Minister Brian came to the front of the crowd and said sincerely, "Your Highness, I heard about what happened in the Netherlands. I must say, your diplomatic methods amaze me." Joseph smiled and said, "This is a victory for France. I just gave it a little push from behind." There was another round of praise from everyone, and then they gradually dispersed. Brian suppressed his smile and said, "Your Highness, from what I heard, the results of the High Court's review will be out in the next few days. Registration should still be refused." Joseph was not surprised. The provisions of the bill submitted this time were designed to be rejected. He said calmly, "Archbishop Brian, don't worry, this is just the beginning. I haven't played my cards yet." Brian thought about the Crown Prince's wonderful operation in the Netherlands and suddenly felt confident. He nodded and encouraged, and then said casually, "By the way, I saw yesterday's financial report. It seems that your loan has not been implemented yet." "Yes, thank you for reminding me. I will deal with it as soon as possible." Joseph returned to his office, looked at the recent important matters, and asked his assistant, "Tomorrow's loan negotiation with Lavelle Bank has been postponed again." The latter said helplessly, "Your Highness, they said they have to check the accounts recently and have no energy for other matters at the moment." Joseph frowned. "What are the arrangements with Laborde Bank?" "There is no reply yet, but my subordinates heard that they have invested a lot of money in the British automatic loom industry and they may not be able to get a multi-million loan in a short time." Huh. Joseph narrowed his eyes immediately. According to his understanding, the French government has cooperated with two banks to obtain short-term loans for more than 10 years. In the past, the assistant to the finance minister did not even need to come forward, and the banks drafted the agreement 2 months in advance. But this time there is only half a month left before the national debt matures, but the two banks are still pushing 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. Damn it, if there is no problem here. The banking system in this era was very inefficient. For a huge sum of more than 6 million yuan, it took several days from the signing of the agreement to the arrival of the funds. In other words, if it is delayed for another 8 or 9 days, the French finance will face a debt default. "We must find another way." Joseph immediately signaled to Emin, who was standing at the door, "Please help me prepare the car. I want to go to the Paris discount bank." "Yes, Your Highness." At noon, Joseph had arrived at the headquarters building of the Paris Discount Bank, the largest bank in France. The manager of the discount bank led a group of managers to greet the Crown Prince with great ceremony and even hosted a banquet for him to have lunch. However, when Joseph mentioned the loan, he was immediately rejected by the other party in a very polite manner. "Your Highness, we have an agreement with Lavelle and other banks. They are responsible for the government's large short-term loans. It is not appropriate for us to get involved in this kind of business." Joseph tried for a long time, but in the end the discount bank was only willing to provide medium and long-term loans with collateral, and the fundraising time may be relatively long. Joseph had no choice but to leave and went to the Bank of Paris again, and got the same answer as the discount bank. His final destination was the Royal Bank. It's just, this family really has no money. Although it is also a big bank. Since John Law created hyperinflation and ruined the reputation of the Royal Bank by running the Mississippi Company Ponzi scheme, this government bank has become as poor as the French government. In the end, only two medium-sized banks were willing to lend 600,000 livres to the French government, and the interest rates were as high as 25%. As for other small banks, many of them only have 1 or 2 million livres in equity and cannot provide many loans at all. Back on the carriage, Joseph's face was as dark as water. These banks were probably premeditated, and it didn't seem like they were deliberately posing to increase interest rates. He looked at his financial assistant. "Can we use administrative means to put pressure on those banks?" The latter immediately said with a grimace, "Your Highness, considering the current financial situation of the government, it is not appropriate to have too much trouble with the banking industry." Joseph took a deep breath looked at the Cano Bank outside the car window, and said in a deep voice, "You dare to play tricks on the national finance, just because you control the financial resources. Okay, then I'll open my own bank, because the author had an eye stone surgery today. The update is late. Please forgive me. Please readers, for the sake of my weak eyesight and strong will, please take pity on the little author, and give me a few monthly tickets and recommendation votes. Please make a little investment and post a few book reviews. The little author will be grateful." Chapter 43 Money Ability. In fact, Joseph had already planned to open a bank point. In order to rectify our country's finances, banks are an indispensable tool, especially after the decline of the royal bank. France does not even have a symbolic central bank, and the government's ability to control finance is almost zero. In addition, the Industrial Revolution is about to enter its explosive period. During this period, massive financial support is needed to ensure that industrial development is not hampered. Therefore, opening a bank is a must for Joseph, but according to his vision, now is not the best time. As we all know, banks rely heavily on the size of their funds. For a bank with a capital of 1 million, no matter how well you run it, it will be difficult to outperform a competitor with a capital of 10 million. Joseph originally planned to wait until more of his resources were realized before investing heavily in the banking industry. However, the current financial provocations from bank capital, coupled with the possible government debt default, made him decide to speed up the process. Fortunately, the profit situation of Paris Angel Company was very gratifying, even exceeding his expectations, which gave him financial confidence to a large extent. All that's left is how to operate it. As the carriage drove slowly, Joseph looked out the window at the trees and pedestrians passing by, silently sorting out the specific plan for opening a bank. Although the banking industry in the 18th century was already booming, from a financial history perspective, it was just getting started, and the various shady operations invented by the financial giants of later generations had not yet appeared. For Joseph, France's financial sector was like Columbus's view of the American continent, new and full of opportunities. More than an hour later, the entire plan appeared in his mind. After repeatedly confirming the completeness and feasibility of the plan, he finally showed a relaxed look on his face and told Demon, "Please send someone to notify Mr. Brent and ask him to come to see me as quickly as possible." "Yes, Your Highness." More than 3 hours later, Joseph returned to the Palace of Versailles and found that Brent was already waiting here. The dedicated manager, in order to rush for time, did not even sit in the car, but came directly on horseback. Joseph first praised his high efficiency and then recruited his own architects, painters, carpenters, accountants and others to the study, and began to assign tasks. "From now on, you have only one thing to do, which is to open as many Paris Angel franchise stores as possible in the shortest possible time." He looked at Brent. "You are solely responsible for this matter. You can use all my resources here to try to open at least 3 stores in Paris within a week. In addition, we will open another direct store in Reims." Brent looked solemn when he heard this. Although according to the Crown Prince's previous requirements, the glass walls, booths, lights, and even store uniforms for the new franchise store were already the walls and floors of the new store, the decoration work will be very time consuming, especially if multiple stores are doing it at the same time. It is simply an impossible task to complete in just 1 week. Joseph saw his expression, smiled slightly, and said, "You will receive a bonus of 1,000 livres for opening the first franchise store. If you open the second franchise store, you will receive a bonus of 1,500 livres. By analogy, for each additional franchise store in the future, the bonus will be 500 livres. He looked at the architect and others again. "Everyone will receive a bonus of 500 livres for opening the first store. Each additional store will increase by 200 livres. With the added ability buff, everyone becomes a Superman." Brent's heart was beating fast, and he made a quick calculation. If he could complete the 3 stores in Paris, he would get 4,500 livres this week! 7,000,044 stores, 10,000 for 5 stores. If all 7 franchise stores and 1 direct store can be opened, his bonus will be a full 22,000 livres. "I have money for the second villa. He blurted out with almost bloodshot eyes, "Don't worry, your highness. I swear to the Lord, I will never let you down." He waved eagerly to the architects, painters and others. "Don't be stunned, come with me." The group of people bowed curtly to Joseph and said goodbye, then sprinted out of the Crown Prince's palace like a 100-meter sprint point in the open space outside the Palace of Versailles. Brent grabbed 10 livres and gave them to the coachman and shouted, "Quick, go back to Paris, quick." Mr. Painter frowned and just calculated the amount of the bonus. 3 stores cost 2,100 livres. When all is completed, it will cost 9,600 livres. Oh, God. 9,600 livres. His heart twitched and his breathing became rapid. He turned to the coachman and shouted, "Mr. Brembo, use your skills. Quick." After everyone left, Joseph quickly wrote a few lines of words, handed them to Emming, and ordered, "Please follow this idea and publicize it in all newspapers, salons, dances and other channels. I will give you 15,000 livres, which must be spent within a week." Emming had never heard of such a strange request. He looked at the paper in his hand doubtfully and saw that it read, "On the 30th of Frost Moon, the shares of Paris Angel Company are officially available for sale in France. Your subscription is welcome." Promotional slogan, standing on the wind, even a pig can fly into the sky. And the next wind outlet is at the Paris Angels. Chapter 44. A powerful shareholder group. Seeing that everyone was paying attention, Joseph continued, "The total share capital of the bank is 10 million shares, with a price of 1 livre per share. It will not be sold to the public for the time being." Mono smiled and nodded. "Since His Highness invited us here, we must buy a share. But I don't know what the total investment in His Highness's bank is." "About 10 million livres." When the 3 of them heard this, they suddenly seemed very interested. They thought it would be profitable, but in the end they really came to get me to invest. "You are an empty bank, saying you want to invest 10 million, but who knows how much you can actually implement in the end? If I have this money, wouldn't it be better if I invested in a mature discount bank?" Robert had the least friendship with Joseph, and was the poorest among the 3. He immediately smiled bitterly and said, "Your Highness, you know my situation. I'm afraid I can't afford much money to invest." Joseph smiled slightly and said, "Listen to what I have to say." A week later, Paris Angel Company will launch a public offering of shares. The total share capital is also 10 million shares, and 2 million shares will be sold at a price of 2 livres per share. If you invest in my bank, you will be able to subscribe for the same number of Paris Angel shares at a price of 1 livre per share before the public sale. After saying this, the eyes of the 3 people suddenly lit up. But Brian was in finance after all, so he hesitated and said, "Your Highness, although Paris Angel's operating conditions are very good, it may not be worth 2 livres per share." "Right, 2 livres per share, 10 million shares in total, which is equivalent to the Paris Angel's market value reaching a terrifying 20 million livres." Joseph motioned to the lawyer at the door to take the franchise store contract and said with a smile, "During this period of time, Paris Angel already has 7 franchise stores. This is the contract, and more investors are ready to sign the franchise agreement. At the same time, I will also open a number of new direct operated stores in various places. I believe that it won't be long before Paris Angel stores can be seen in major cities in France. Within half a year, Paris Angel stores will be all over Europe. To be honest, the price of 2 livres per share is low." He then explained the meaning of the franchise store again, and now the 3 people at the same table could no longer remain calm. "Which company is the most popular in Paris right now?" "That, of course, is the Paris Angel. There are no women in the streets of Paris who don't know about angel water. Old women and young girls in their own families also spend thousands of livres on this kind of cosmetics. Moreover, the influence of angel water has begun to spread throughout France. A few days ago, a group of ladies from Marseille came to Paris to buy it. If there is only one store, it is indeed impossible for the company to be valued at 20 million, but if there are 9 stores, then this number is relatively close. And the novel franchise model is indeed very attractive. To be honest, after hearing this, the 3 of them have the idea of investing in opening a franchise store. How did the crown prince come up with such a brilliant business model? No wonder everyone says he is a son of God. His mind has definitely been touched by God himself. It's clear that before long France will be filled with Paris Angels franchises by then. The market value of this company will definitely rise like the water of the Seine River during heavy rain season. Brian narrowed his eyes. If he bought it for 1 livre and sold it later, he would earn at least 1 livre per share. It is equivalent to giving away shares of the bank for free. Moreover, he estimated that the share price of Paris Angel could not remain at 2 livres forever and should rise soon. He no longer hesitated, looked at Joseph and said, "Your Highness, since you have said so, I will invest 250,000 livres." Seeing that the Archbishop had taken action, Mono immediately followed up, "Your Highness, I will also invest 500,000 livres." Joseph was a little confused. "Count Monad, because the shares are limited, I can only give you 3% at most. Please understand. After all, there are the King and Queen, Prince Condé, Count Artois and others." When Mono heard these names, he immediately smiled and waved. Okay, then 300,000. Robert also gritted his teeth and took out 200,000 livres finally. Joseph stated that these shares only have dividend rights and have no operating decision-making rights. The three of them came here to make money, so they had no objections at the dinner table. Everyone was very happy, raising their glasses and clinking their glasses together in laughter. The next day, Joseph had lunch with Louis XVI and Queen Mary and took advantage of this opportunity to sell each of them 5% of the bank shares. There was no need for his own parents to use Paris Angels shares as bait. Joseph directly asked them for an investment of 500,000, saying thank you to express his feelings. It's just that Louis XVI spent 600,000 livres to support his son's Dutch strategy last time. Although it turned out that he made the right bet, he made a lot of money politically, but not at all in cash. At the moment, he only had around 100,000 spare cash left in his hand, so he invested all of it in his son, and the rest could only be given as a blank check. Queen Mary is known as Mrs. Deficit. Although this is basically a slander, she is indeed used to spending money. She only has 220,000 in hand and owes the remaining 280,000. However, Joseph was not really doing it for their funds. He was mainly trying to get two thick thighs to invest in the company so that he could use the tiger skin as a banner in the future. In the afternoon, Joseph rushed to Paris without stopping and met successively with the Prince of Condé, who had great influence in the army, and the hardline royalist Duke of Artois, who was the biological brother of Louis XVI. When the two heard that they could buy Paris Angel shares at a low price, they naturally did not refuse the money sent to them. They each subscribed for 400,000 livres of bank shares, remembering the favor from the crown prince in their hearts. At noon that day, all over France were talking about the Paris Angel company's stock offering. There is no way. Every newspaper is talking about Paris Angel. No matter what salon, someone will lead the topic to this topic. After it starts, of course, there is internal news circulating in the Palace of Versailles, saying that Paris Angel has a sales volume of 120,000 a day, has opened 8 or 9 branches, and has plans to open stores in the UK, Spain, the Netherlands and other places. The scale of the company is amazing. Everyone was itching and began to raise money one after another, preparing to snap up the original shares of Paris Angel. At the same time, in the office of the general manager of Banque Lavelle in Paris, General Manager Etienne frowned and asked his assistant, "No one from the finance minister has come to negotiate?" The latter nodded and said, "Yes, a low-level official came to ask about the loan more than 10 days ago, and no one has come since." Etienne wondered to himself, "It's strange. The national debt is about to mature, and the crown prince is not in a hurry." The assistant said, "Did they get a loan from another bank?" Etienne shook his head. "The Duke of Orleans has already contacted other banks. There is no way anyone will lend to him." He murmured in his heart, even if the crown prince has no experience, other financial officials should remind him about the national debt. Why is he so calm? By the way, does any big reader have a reading list? I apply to be added to your book list. Chapter 45, Controlling the Paris Police. Etienne thought for a long time and decided to go to Versailles tomorrow to inquire about the situation in person. After all, this loan is also an important business of Lavelle Bank. He just promised the Duke of Orleans that he would wait until the last day before lending money, but that didn't mean that he didn't want to do the business the next day. In Joseph's drawing room, Besançon and Friant sat upright on the sofa covered with Persian blankets. Joseph motioned for them to drink tea and said with a smile, "It seems like things are going pretty smoothly on your end. Besançon has been officially appointed as Paris police chief." He first took out a document and handed it to Joseph respectfully. "Your Highness, the evaluation, reorganization, and training of police officers in various districts of Paris have been completed, and the new police force has taken over the security a few days ago. This is a recommendation of the main officers of the police department after the reorganization, and you still need to finalize it." Joseph opened the document and saw a series of police station positions. Under each position there were at least 2 candidates, as well as the person's detailed information. Joseph took a rough look at it. Generally speaking, it was a major change of officers in the entire Paris police system. Because St. Anthony district was the first to carry out police reform, the St. Anthony department accounted for nearly 40% of the selection of officials. Arden and Magoni were both nominated as police commissioners. In addition, police officers who are proficient in business, honest and have a good reputation are selected from the previous police force and promoted to officials at all levels of the police force. However, according to Joseph's previous request, only people from minor nobles and commoners were used. There is also a very small part of Besançon's own people. Joseph nodded. It can be seen from this list that Besançon is very dedicated to police reform and has good abilities. After the replacement of these officials, it can be said that the Paris police system is completely in their own hands. He selected Arden and a few other people he was familiar with and left the rest to Besançon to decide. Only by trusting people and giving more power to his subordinates could he do things better for himself. Besançon continued, "Your Highness, as for the former police officers, my subordinates took it upon themselves to set up a daily affairs team responsible for tasks such as river supervision and sanitation cleaning. They were all transferred to this team." Joseph knew that he was referring to those who paid money to join the police force because they had a contract with the city hall and could not be fired directly. It would be good to manage the city's sanitation. "Well, that's a good arrangement," Besançon finally said cautiously. "Your Highness, the new uniforms have been customized and the equipment has been replaced with new ones. However, the funding is..." Joseph smiled and waved. "Just give me how much money you need to write a report." "Yes. Thank you, Your Highness." Joseph now holds the franchise fee from the Paris Angel franchisee, plus the bank stock investment from the king to the cabinet officials, as well as the operating income from the Paris Angel company, totaling more than 3.1 million livres. He really didn't take the cost of the Paris police department into consideration. Friant waited for Besançon to finish his report and immediately said, "Your Highness, the first batch of trainees at the Paris Police Academy has been recruited, a total of 201 people. I plan to officially start the school in a week. Do you think you are free to preside over the opening ceremony so soon? Of course you want to go." Joseph was surprised. "You know, the police academy was just an idea more than half a month ago, and now it's about to start in a week." Friant said, "Your Highness, according to your instructions, I bought a 2-hectare piece of land in St. Anthony district. There are many buildings on it. Although it is a bit dilapidated, with a little repair, it can still be used as a school building. In addition, the citizens of St. Anthony district learned that His Highness opened the police academy and came to help for free. Works such as leveling the playground were completed in just 1 week." Besançon added, "Your Highness, in fact, since last week, my subordinates have been rotating 100 police officers to go to the police academy for training every day. Although the police academy is a bit rudimentary at the moment, there is still no problem in conducting general training." Joseph secretly thought, "This Friant is really a talent. His efficiency is so high that he doesn't look like a person from the 18th century. Such subordinates must be heavily rewarded." Make up for yesterday's missed update. I would like to ask for a vote, by the way. Readers, please save more, vote for recommendations, monthly votes, and leave more messages. The young author is grateful. Reader group 1,036,217,580. Everyone is welcome to join the group and chat and discuss together. Chapter 46. The Inspector General of Police and the Dean of Academic Affairs. You did a great job. Joseph looked at Friant with approval. Continue to recruit students and select those with outstanding qualifications and enterprising spirit to form an elite class for key training. Also, the police academy is just under construction. You can make it simpler, but you can't keep it that way. Build a new school building as soon as possible and purchase training equipment and equipment. Oh, just follow the standards of the Paris Military Academy. You can only be better than it, not better. It's worse than that. I'll give you 250,000 livres first. Friant's heart skipped a beat when he heard this figure. Such a huge sum of money was not meant to build a school for training young police officers. It was almost enough to build a serious military academy. Joseph seemed to be testing his heart's ability to withstand pressure and continued. This is the initial construction cost. I plan to invest a total of more than 1 million. After all construction is completed, the enrollment will exceed 3,000 people. Friant swallowed and responded quickly. Yes, Your Highness. Joseph seemed to say casually, by the way, everyone has worked hard during the preparation stage of the police academy. 5,000 livres will be taken from the funds to reward the management of the police academy, including Key himself. Yes. Thank you, Your Highness. The preparations for the police academy were far faster than expected, and this must be rewarded. The police academy has just opened, and among all the instructors and civilian staff, including those who manage and build the school building, there are only more than 20 people in total, which is equivalent to half a year's salary for each person. When Besançon heard this, his eyes were full of envy. He used to think that Friant was just the director of the police academy, but now he saw that this was no ordinary police academy. Friant's future development may not be worse than that of his police chief. He secretly thought that he would have to work hard from now on. In the police system, he must defeat Friant. When Etienne, general manager of Lavelle Bank, arrived at the Palace of Versailles, it was just after 10 o'clock in the morning. He has been dealing with the French financial system for more than 10 years and is very familiar with it. It didn't take long for him to find someone in the financial system. He found a quiet corner and asked in a low voice, Viscount Lien, the national debt is about to expire. Why are the financial people not in a hurry? What does it look like? Viscount Lien looked around and whispered, as far as I know, there is a French reserve bank that lent money to the Crown Prince, including Laborde Bank, and your loan is no longer needed for the time being. Etienne frowned, thinking that his brain was fuming, and he didn't think of someone called the Reserve Bank of France. He was a little suspicious at the moment and said, is your information accurate? Ah, you questioning me? Viscount Lien was a little displeased and said with a sullen face, the loan agreement with the Reserve Bank of France has been prepared. I saw it with my own eyes. How can I be wrong? Etienne felt as if he had been struck by lightning. The short-term loan amounted to 6 million livres, with Bank Lavelle and Bank Laborde sharing half of it. It will contribute more than 300,000 in interest to Lavelle Bank every year, which is an important business for the bank. If this business is robbed by others, I will definitely be punished. He was so anxious that he was sweating, and he couldn't help but think of the previous agreement between the bank and the Duke of Orleans. Lavelle Bank would delay the loan until the deadline. When the Crown Prince had nothing to do, the Duke of Orleans people would come forward, and the bank would immediately lend money. Why is it different from what the Duke of Orleans said now? Damn it, it must be the Reserve Bank of France. Etienne's eyes were about to burst into flames. It was definitely a small bank that had just been established and didn't understand the rules. When this matter is over, he must pay the price. But first we need to get this loan business back. Thinking of this, Etienne hurriedly thanked Viscount Lien and promised some benefits and hurried to the Chancellor of Finance's office. He had a famous plan in mind and lowered the loan interest rates to 17%, which should be enough to impress the Crown Prince, but it didn't work. It dropped to 16%. Besançon and Friant finished reporting on the police system. As soon as they stood up, to say goodbye to the Crown Prince, they saw Joseph's assistant in the financial system approaching and saluted, "Your Highness, Eddie, General Manager of Lavelle Bank, and asked to see you, and said that he wanted to talk to you about the loan." When Joseph heard Lavelle Bank, his face suddenly darkened, and he said coldly, "There is nothing to talk about. Please ask him to go back." The assistant hesitated for a moment and then said, "Your Highness, Mr. Etienne said that to show his sincerity, he is willing to reduce the loan interest rates to 17%. Joseph smiled. "What sincerity?" He must have heard about the Reserve Bank of France. "Are you anxious now?" "It's too late. The Reserve Bank of France is naturally the bank he is preparing. Although the bank has not yet been established, it does not prevent him from drafting a contract with the French government in advance." He said to his assistant, "Please tell him, and the Laborde Bank, so that you don't have to trouble them with this loan in the future." He paused and then said, "When I get back, I will check to see if there is any other cooperation between the government and these two banks. Help me formulate a plan to transfer all the loans involving them to other banks." "Well, the name of the plan is Financing Risk Reduction Planning." Surprise flashed in the assistant's eyes, but he immediately bowed and said, "Yes, Your Highness." Besançon was thoughtful, and when he saw the Crown Prince mentioning Lavelle Bank, his expression was obviously not good, so he immediately wrote it down silently. When he came out of the Crown Prince's palace, he immediately caught up with the assistant and asked what was going on. Although the matter involved financial secrets, when the latter learned that Besançon was the new Paris police chief, he immediately became polite and explained the matter in general. Besançon narrowed his eyes when he heard that there were two banks that were apparently trying to stumbling upon the Crown Prince, almost causing His Highness to default on his debt. He was single-handedly promoted to the position of Paris police chief by the Crown Prince, and he was entrusted with the important task of police reform. He knew how to repay his kindness, and he was naturally devoted to the Crown Prince. At present, some people dare to cause trouble for the Crown Prince. His Highness is magnanimous and does not care about them, but as a direct descendant of the Crown Prince, he must not just let it go. Banco Lavelle and Banco Laborde, you must pay for this." On the other side, Etienne was walking out of the Palace of Versailles in despair. He had just been informed that not only would the 6 million livre loan business have nothing to do with Banque Lavelle in the future, the government would probably terminate all cooperation with him in the future. One of the core businesses of Lavelle Bank is to provide short-term large loans to the government with high interest rates and almost no risk. It's just that in the past, the French government was as poor as a church mouse and always had to beg for bank loans. Who knows why it suddenly became hardline this time. Etienne looked as hen. If this matter was confirmed, he would not only be unemployed, the angry shareholders of Lavelle Bank would even sell him to Haiti to work as a coolie for the rest of his life. Thinking of this, he shuddered, but the matter was completely out of his control. He had no choice but to grit his teeth and rush back to Paris to report the matter to the bank's board of directors. Because of the strong support from readers, the young author has the honor to enter the third round of recommendation for the new book. Thank you for your support. I would like to ask for monthly votes, recommendation votes, and follow-up reading. The author would be very grateful. Chapter 47 Award Ceremony. Draud Laborde had never been so agitated. Since he took over the family business, the manager of the Laborde Bank brought him very bad news today. The French government, to be precise, the Dauphin in charge of financial loans, intends to terminate cooperation with them. Today, the industrial and commercial situation in France as a whole is sluggish. Large government loans are the best part of Laborde Bank's business. If it loses this business, Laborde Bank may not be able to survive. Soon, Goldman, the major shareholder of Lavelle Bank, came to the door and proved the government's intention to terminate the cooperation. In this matter, the two banks are grasshoppers on a rope and must cooperate fully. The two discussed for a long time with the shareholders of both banks and finally found that the core of the problem lay with the French Reserve Bank. This is an outlier who does not abide by the tacit understanding within the banking industry. If it were not for it, the French government would have to beg the banks of Lavelle and Laborde for loans. Soon someone suggested, maybe we can do some deal with this French Reserve Bank. So, Count Laborde looked at everyone Who knows the news about this bank? No one said anything. After a long while, Goldman frowned and said, "It's probably a foreign bank that just arrived in Paris." Laborde nodded. "It seems that we can only seek help from Mr. Necker in the garden of the Villa of Necker, a senior advisor to the French Banking Association and a famous banker." Laborde and Goldman recounted what had happened, simply referring to the French government as a large client and the national debt as the client's private debt, and then looked at Necker longingly. Point. "If there's only one person in Paris who knows the Reserve Bank of France, it's the most well-informed guru in French banking." Point. However, Necker just smiled and shook his head. "I have never heard of this bank." He lowered his head to prune the perfumed jasmine and said, "However, I think you two have fallen into the trap of your client." Trap. "He is a very calm gentleman." Necker swept the flower branches on the ground together and wiped his sweat. "The more this time, the more you think that he will not take the risk of cheating, but I can almost do it for sure. This French Reserve Bank is just a ruse he uses to scare you. If you go to him because you are worried about losing your business, he will be able to lower the interest rate, pretend to stop cooperating with the fictitious bank, and ask you to lend money as soon as possible." Laborde and Goldman looked at each other, feeling suddenly enlightened. Necker looked like a hunter who has seen through the hiding place of his prey. "I believe that if you don't make compromises in the last 2 days before the client's debt is due, he will get your loan at any cost." Laborde nodded vigorously. "Mr. Necker is indeed the best banker in France. If it weren't for you, we would have been fooled this time. We listen to you, and will wait until the last day." In the Apollo Hall of the Palace of Versailles, which was filled with gold, an extremely grand commendation ceremony was taking place. The rapid beating of military drums and the solemn sound of trumpets stopped at the same time. The Minister of War, the Marquis Saint Priest, shouted to the several soldiers standing in front of him, "Stand at attention." The deputy next to him slammed his cane on the ground hard, making a muffled sound. The soldiers held their heads high and stood as straight as swords. Saint Priest turned around and raised his hat in salute to Louis XVI. "Your Majesty the King, Your Majesty the Queen, Your Royal Highness the Dauphin, please allow me to introduce to you the heroes of this Battle of Amstelveen. Captain Marie-Francois de Dubois, Lieutenant Desprez de Foucault, 2nd Lieutenant Louis-André de Davout." Note 1. After he finished introducing them one by one, Louis XVI took the lead and walked up to Dubois, praised him highly, then picked up the brass cufflinks and solemnly handed them to him. "You are officially awarded the rank of Major." Then he walked towards Lieutenant Foucault and continued to confer the title, while Queen Mary took a wreath from the hand of the maid, put it on Dubois' head with a smile, and said softly, "You are the hero of France." After she walked to the next recipient, Joseph then came to Dubois and said a prepared congratulation. "Your tactics and strategies are very wonderful. Without your command, the Dutch army would probably be defeated in the first 2 days." He was originally not prepared to participate in such a ceremony with complicated rules, but as the planner of the Dutch defeat of Prussia, the Queen and the military strongly requested him to participate in the commendation ceremony, so he had no choice but to come reluctantly. Dubois immediately raised his hat in return. "Your Highness, these are not my fault. It is you who designed the overall strategic layout, so that the Prussians had no choice but to retreat. As for the tactical arrangements in Amstelveen, they are actually mine. A good friend, what Captain Berthier planned for me before I left, I just followed it." Joseph felt that he heard a familiar name and asked hurriedly, "Berthier? Which Berthier are you talking about?" "Your Highness, this is Major Louis Alexander Berthier, subordinate to General Custanet." Note 1. Davout's surname should be Davao, which is close to Davao. According to translation habits, it is still written as Davao, and the word symbolizing the nobility is added in front. "I have finished the novel, lady. Please stop." A fantasy novel about sexual transformation, and it has an audio version. "You are welcome to read it, lady. Please stop." Synopsis. Once the surgeon traveled through time, he came to a different world, where women were strong and men were weak, and there were more women than men. he became Zhu Yang, the young master of the Zhu family. Women with strong spiritual powers can move mountains and reclaim seas, reach for stars and block out the sun, and conquer the world with their strength. I, Zhu Yang, rely on soft power to conquer the world. Ahem. Rely on soft power. Chapter 48. Today is a good day. Joseph's eyes suddenly lit up, but for the sake of safety, he continued to ask, do you know anything else about him? Du Bois was a little depressed. It seems that I'm the one receiving the award today. Why does His Highness keep asking about Alexander? However, he still patiently replied, Your Highness, he comes from a military family. He is good at drawing, has a flexible mind, and can endure hardships. He also fought in the United States with Count Rochambeau, and he made the operational deployment plan for the Battle of Yorktown. Hearing that he was good at drawing and had participated in the American Revolutionary War, Joseph was completely sure that this was the famous personal nanny of Emperor Napoleon in history, the chief of army general staff, who followed the emperor from Italy to Tsarist Russia and made countless meritorious deeds. Marshal Berthier, of course. The future marshal is still just an ordinary major, working under a mediocre military noble. Joseph knew that, in order to reorganize France, the army must be firmly in his hands. However, it is the great aristocracy that now controls the French military. France is still in the transition period from the feudal military system to the modern military system. The army is a bit like the private soldiers of the vassal towns in the late Ming dynasty. The garrison in each province is funded by the provincial finance and the local nobles to support and train them. The quality of the army's equipment and combat effectiveness all depends on local investment. Of course, based on the principle of whoever pays, who calls the shots. Only the local military nobles can command this army. This can be seen from the names of the French armies at this time. Flanders Brigade, Soissons Infantry Regiment, Bordeaux Brigade, etc., all named after place names, which were the former fiefdoms of the great lords. Therefore, if the king wants to mobilize the army, he must look at the eyes of the military nobles. In times of peace and prosperity, nobles will naturally be more cooperative, but if the situation becomes a little turbulent, that's a different story. For example, right now, the relationship between the French aristocracy and the king is not very harmonious. During the French Revolutionary period in history, Louis XVI claimed to have mobilized 20 regiments of troops to serve as king, but until he was defeated, not a single soldier entered Paris during this period. Only the 16 Swiss mercenary regiments supported by private funds and a small number of personal guards were completely loyal to the king. In addition, he could not even command the French guards stationed under his nose. Although the Parisian citizens who attacked the Bastille had guns, they could only look back and sigh in the face of a solid fortress more than 10 meters high. In the end, it was precisely because the French guards dragged in cannons to help that the wooden lone had no choice but to surrender. Therefore, the royal family seems to be in great power and has unlimited glory. In fact, the great aristocracy has already united with emerging capital groups to gradually take power in military, judicial, economic, public opinion and other aspects into its own hands. Among them, the royal power was most severely neglected in the two areas of military and economic affairs at present. The great nobles and capital groups have not yet coordinated their interests, and the royal power is still there. So the superficial calm is maintained. But when an opportunity like the Level 3 conference arises, these guys will immediately make trouble. Therefore, controlling military power has always been Joseph's top priority. It's just that his current political foundation is too weak to reach into the bowl of the military aristocracy. Seizing military power is destined to be a long and very difficult process. Of course, Joseph also had his own set of plans for this. In fact, the Paris Police Academy was the first hidden stake he laid in military power in the minds of people of this era. The police were basically a group of gangsters hired by the government and could not become a major factor at all. This gave Joseph the space to get involved in violent institutions. With the police academy as a foothold, he can use this as a basis to start building a direct force that will absolutely obey his orders. It sounds like just one sentence, but when done, it becomes complicated. First of all, you must have money. The army is a gold-eating beast. Fortunately, he now has Paris Angel Company. Although he is still far from feeding the gold-eating beast, he can still get the initial starting capital point. The second is equipment, which must have advanced weapons that can overwhelm all opponents. Joseph is the most confident about this. The equipment and technology in his mind can definitely crush this era. He just needs to find a way to manufacture it. Finally, and the most critical thing is people, military talents, including high quality soldiers and excellent commanders, especially the latter. A good general can even determine the outcome of a battle, and Berthier is such an outstanding officer. It can be said that without his assistance, the Emperor's record may be much bleak. There is a good opportunity to connect with Berthier right now, and Joseph must not miss it. Just as he was about to get more information about the Chief of General Staff from the boy, he heard someone coughing twice. He turned around and saw that Emin was winking at him, and then he remembered that the award ceremony was still being held. He had no choice but to walk to Lieutenant Falco, said some words of encouragement to the artillery company commander, and then continued to the next one. The young cavalry captain immediately straightened his straight back. Ever since he learned some of the secrets behind the situation in the Netherlands, he had grown to admire the young crown prince. Joseph smiled and signaled to him. He had been holding a trace of expectation in his heart ever since he heard the officer's last name was Davout. As usual, he first praised Davout for leading the cavalry in the heroic battle, and then he couldn't wait to ask, Lieutenant Davout, has anyone in your family served in the Forbidden Army? Davout nodded in surprise. Yes, Your Highness. My father once served as company commander in the Royal Cavalry. Joseph's eyes suddenly lit up. Do you have any relatives named Nicola? Davout was even more surprised. Your Highness, do you know my brother, Nicholas? Is your brother? Yes, Your Highness. Louis Nicolas de Davout is my biological brother. Joseph was overjoyed. What a good day is today. Winning the jackpot actually happened to me twice in a row. Nicolas Davout, Iron Marshal, one of the three most powerful generals under Emperor Nap, a super military genius. It is common for him to win with less and win more, and he has turned the tide of the battle on his own many times. The man who was praised by the Emperor as a purest glory of France. If I miss this, I won't forgive myself. Joseph took half a step forward and asked, where is your brother serving now, Your Highness? Nicholas is still in military school and will graduate next year. He hasn't graduated yet. Joseph felt a little regretful, but then he thought about it. It would be better to hold on to his brother now and wait until he graduates to get it directly to him, which would make it easier to build trust. After the entire commendation ceremony was over, a group of meritorious officers said goodbye to the king and queen. When they came to Joseph, he suddenly grabbed Du Bois and André Davout with the excuse that he wanted to listen to them talk about the fierce battlefield in the Netherlands battle situation, and dragged the two people to the square outside the Palace of Versailles. Because this book is being recommended for new books, it is very important for young authors. I urge readers to save it, vote for recommendations, monthly votes, and leave messages. The young author is grateful. Your support is the motivation for me to code. Reader group 1,036,217,580. Everyone is welcome to join the group and chat and discuss together. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49, The Crown Prince's Strategic Vision. The huge fountain reflects a pleasant light under the sun. Before Joseph could speak, André couldn't help but asked, Your Highness, I really want to know, how did you make the Prussians retreat? In the past few days, the scene of the Prussian army suddenly retreating, when he was determined to die, that day often appeared in his mind. Du Bois was about to blame him for violating etiquette, but when he heard the words order the Prussians to retreat, he was surprised and said, is it really His Highness's plan in the Netherlands? He has no connection with the Tatsuwu family. Although he has heard that the incident in Holland is related to the Crown Prince, this is the first time he has heard confirmed news today. André nodded and looked at the Crown Prince expectantly. Joseph smiled and said, it is too detailed to disclose. Basically, Wilhelmina was handed over to the Southern Netherlands police and asked to send her back to Prussia. Then the Patriot Party took the Prince of Orange back to Amsterdam. William II naturally, the world has no excuse to continue to interfere in the Netherlands. His simple words contained a huge amount of information. How to find Wilhelmina, how to get her to the southern Netherlands, and finally how to get her back to Prussia. She just happened to be stuck on the battlefield at a time when she had not yet let her go. William II suspected France. André and Du Bois looked at each other and saw the surprise and admiration in each other's eyes. The Crown Prince's method was really wonderful. It was just a matter of confidentiality, and they felt very itchy, but they couldn't ask more questions. Then the two men began to talk about the bloody and fierce fighting on the Dutch battlefield, especially on the last day, when the Prussian army attacked extremely fiercely, and more than 40 of the 300 French volunteers suffered casualties. When André said this, he sighed solemnly. The Prussian army has strict military discipline and a high level of training. If they had continued to fight at that time, I guess the Dutch would never have lasted until nightfall. Du Bois nodded. Right now, Alexander is studying the Prussian army's military system, training and other information. According to him, he glanced at Joseph and said carefully, the Prussian army's combat capability is 1/3 greater than that of the French army. Joseph knew that what he said was not an exaggeration. Prussia was once known as the first army in Europe. The military training system of the Junker aristocracy was very complete and extremely strict. Coupled with the German perseverance and obedience, although it has declined now, its combat capabilities have declined. Still not to be underestimated point, he solemnly said, France's military system is too aging and should have been comprehensively reformed long ago. Historically, the old French army suffered many heavy losses on the battlefield. It was not until the emergence of the emperor that the situation was stabilized. Under the auspices of the emperor, the army completed military reforms and eventually became a powerful European army. Du Bois immediately agreed. That's true. Alexander and I have talked about this many times. We should learn from Prussia in an all-round way in order to cope with various challenges in the future. Learn from Prussia? Joseph looked at him, but shook his head slightly. What we have to do is to surpass the Prussian army, not blindly learn from them. André and Du Bois looked at each other again. Then how does His Highness think the army should be reformed? Joseph had thought about this before, and immediately said, the biggest problem of the French army is that the army is fragmented. There is no unified command, no unified training, and the equipment and the quality of the soldiers are very different. When encountering a big battle, the assembled army looks huge, but in fact there are very few fighting groups. Since he talked about military reform, he followed this topic and talked about abolishing local legions, unified management of the national army, increasing the number and training of non-commissioned officers, and developing new tactics. André and Du Bois' eyes widened as they heard this. The Crown Prince was only 13 years old, but he had such strategic foresight. After studying in the military academy for several years, he only knew how to repeat his predecessors. The experiences, as if I don't have a brain. Chapter 50 come to my bowl. Du Bois, in particular, is older and knows that the organization, management, training and logistics of the army are the foundation for improving combat effectiveness. He has taken out a pen and paper, repeating in a low voice the content of the military reforms that the Crown Prince just said, and copy it down quickly. Develop a recruitment system for the whole of France, complete recruitment and pension regulations, and formulate regulations. Establish the French Ministry of Military Affairs, gradually eliminate local garrison troops, and unify the selection, assessment, and promotion systems of the French army, improving the status of meritorious soldiers, and making supreme honor the highest pursuit of the military. Build a national level ordnance production and equipment system, encourage the research of new weapons, and accelerate the use of new weapons. Opening a military hospital. The more he wrote, the more excited he became. If these measures could be implemented, France would surely have an invincible army capable of defeating all enemies. The shame of being forced to sign the Paris Peace Treaty will be completely wiped away, and everything France lost will be regained. His father died on the battlefield in Liegnitz during the 7 Years' War. When he was only 8 years old. He only remembered that France was defeated in the war and the whole country was shrouded in gloom. His father's death did not win him any honor. On the contrary, there were mean people who laughed at the incompetence of the French soldiers in front of him. He also knew that he, a small major, could not influence France's military reform at all, but he could hand over these precious ideas to experts, like Berthier, for further research. From the corner of his eye, Joseph saw Dubois' serious and excited look while transcribing. He felt that the fire was almost ready. He smiled like a little fox stealing chickens. Mr. Major seems to agree with this military reform plan. I don't know. Would you be interested in assisting me in moving this forward? I'm willing to do it for your highness. Dubois said halfway before he hesitated. It's just that I'm not very good at this, so I'm afraid I will disappoint his highness. Joseph thought to himself, then find me people who are good at it, such as Mr. Chief of General Staff. But he still smiled and said, you have rich practical experience, which is exactly what is needed to improve the military reform plan. To be honest, you said that I'm organizing people to conduct research on military theory, and I hope you can help me. Dubois immediately raised his head and stood at attention and said, it is my lifelong honor to follow you. Joseph nodded happily, looked at Andre with a smile, and said in a friendly tone, Mr. Lieutenant, why didn't you inherit the glory of your father's generation and continue to serve in the Forbidden Army? Reluctance and loneliness flashed in Andre's eyes. Your highness, I have always had a great flame called love in my chest. Back then, because of my pursuit and persistence of this flame, I burned some people. In the end, I went Soissons cavalry battalion. Joseph said, then are you willing to serve here? Of course. Andre said loudly, unable to conceal his surprise and surprise. The title of the Dauphin family was awarded by His Majesty the Old King, and loyalty to the royal family is the Dauphin family's oath. I will become His Highness's most loyal soldier. Joseph also looked at the two people in front of him with great joy. With their two lines, the two great players Berthier and Dauphin would come to his bowl sooner or later. The focus of all Parisian talk these days is the new Paris Angel stores. They couldn't help but pay attention to this. 3 new stores were being prepared at the same time, like 3 whirlpools on the sea, continuously sucking in wood, glass, paint, copperware, etc. from all over Paris. The top craftsmen in Paris are also gathered in Paris Angel's shop. They are all exhausted, but their faces are full of fanatical excitement. And this week, they made more money than in the usual 3 months. Every day, the stewards of Paris Angels would prepare 4 meals a day, deliver them to them on time, wait for them to finish eating attentively, and then politely ask them to continue working. As for the meals, there are fried meats, corn mixed with butter, white bread, and tomato and vegetable soup. The taste is so fragrant and tempting that you can eat as much as you want. None of the craftsmen complained that they were tired, and no one wanted to take a rest. If anyone asked them to take a break at this time, they would scold him without hesitation. That was 4 times the remuneration. Stopping for even a second is an insult to your wallet. At night, a large number of oil lamps will be lit inside and outside the store, illuminating it as bright as day, and the shift craftsmen will take over and continue working. There were even people in good health who set a record of working 3 days and 2 nights in a row and received a full 28 livres in overtime pay. Oh, there are extra fees for overtime work. It's incredible. When the craftsmen heard that this was the Crown Prince's request, they prayed for him almost every day. Some people in later generations always like to say that Westerners advocate freedom and enjoy life, and have not liked to work overtime since ancient times. In fact, France in the 18th century was very busy. It was normal to work 14 hours a day in the factory. As long as you were paid, you could work 20 hours. Hours don't matter. What Joseph didn't expect at the beginning was that his efforts to catch up with the opening of the franchise store would bring unexpected gains. Those Parisian citizens who had nothing to do would regard watching the construction of the new store as a form of entertainment, causing the popularity of Paris Angels to continue to rise. If there were hot searches in this era, the topic of Paris Angels would occupy the top 10. It's no wonder that there are too few entertainment projects in this era. Such a luxurious store decorated 24 hours a day is a rare novelty. The little boy who was begging in the alley behind the Angel store in Paris, with his sister and 4 other homeless children, was busy among the crowd with several piles of chairs. He listened to Joseph's advice and started a chair rental business. During this time, he made a lot of silver coins and his team expanded to 6 people. He now rents a house, and he and his sister no longer have to go hungry. He even plans to save some money and spend a few hours every day learning to read. Time flies. Brent, general manager of Paris Angel Company, stood on the Boulevard Saint Denis and looked at the luxurious and elegant new Paris Angel store in front of him, feeling a sense of infinite pride and accomplishment in his heart. In 7 days, only 7 days, the new store was decorated. He led the company's employees and countless craftsmen to create this miracle. Of course, the renovation cost of 20,000 livres also played an important role. There are 2 more similar stores in the west and north districts of Paris, which will be completed today. At the same time, there is also a franchise store waiting to open in Reims, 30 miles away. However, due to some accidents, the company's new store there still needs 2 days to complete. In other words, Paris Angel currently has 5 stores that are open for business, even stores as far away as Marseille and Bordeaux. According to the news sent back by his men yesterday, the renovations will be completed by the end of the month at most. At the same time, there was a huge crowd in front of the Paris City Hall, with 400 to 500 people stretching their necks, anxiously waiting for the moment when the shares of Paris Angel Company were officially launched. Well, because of the Bubble Act, this was the temporary stock exchange chosen by Joseph. Thanks to Boss K Shunning for his generous reward of 5,000 starting coins for this book. This is the largest reward the author has ever received since writing a book. My little sweetheart is so excited that I can only repay the big brother's love by adding more time. Mwah. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.